Welcome in. It is Friday morning. So, Jeff Bell and I are here for one of our mega episodes where we're going to go through all of the matchups for week 16, picking it apart player by player, trying to help you prep for the semifinals in your fantasy football playoffs. Jeff, quite a game last night. Dare I say the game of the year? I mean, just an unbelievable game considering the stakes, the come from behind victory, overtime. That was, I think, the best game of the year so far.
Yeah, it definitely was the best game of the year. I think you've got when the Rams were up 30-14, it just felt very inevitable. And I mean, the Rams, we've seen them all year long look like one of the very best teams in football. But then, similar to the Eagles game, very early in the season, when the Rams got up big on the Eagles and they allowed a comeback there, it's going to have to be something the Rams are going to have to keep an eye on here. That defense or that offense stalled out and had multiple 3-and-outs. And then we saw the Rashid Shaheed punt return touchdown. Big plays like that, when you're trying to make a comeback, are what usually ends up swinging the momentum. And I think that coming out of last night's game, it's really kind of the theme of last night's game was almost to expect the unexpected. I mean, outside of Puka Nakua doing and his thing and Jackson Smith and Jigba getting it late, I mean, everybody was ready for the Colby Parkinson night and really nothing there in a revenge spot. And then as well as the Seahawks backs, I know tracking, looking at the backfield breakdown that I do every week, the Seahawks backfield over the last 2 weeks has been absolutely horrible for fantasy football. And then we saw huge game from Kenneth Walker, his best game of the season, really. And then Zach Charbonnet adds the touchdown as well. So coming out of it's just really kind of very, very unexpected. Sam Darnold, we'll wait and see if he conquered some ghosts there, because we know the Rams have been a bugaboo for him over his last couple of games, and 9 sacks in the playoffs last year, 4 interceptions earlier this year. So yeah, it's one of the reasons why we love this game that we love. It's one of the reasons why things can be so unpredictable. And you're exactly right. Game of the year.
Yeah, and I think you talk about the seeing ghosts. I think the coaching staff was aware of that with Sam Darnold. We saw him on such a short leash for the first 3 quarters of that game, and finally, like after that Rashid Shaheed touchdown, they had to kind of open it up and let it rip a little bit. And Sam Darnold made some mistakes, had a couple of turnovers, took some timely sacks, but at the same time, he was able to make big plays when it mattered. And then last question I have about this game, Jeff. Any words of wisdom for anybody who faced off against Puka Nacua last night?
Well, I would say if you faced Kyle Pitts last week and you're still going, I mean, you're in a better spot after facing Puka Nacua, because I think the thing with Kyle Pitts is, one, it was a tight end position that did that. 2, it was a later draft pick, a guy drafted round 10 or later in your draft. And so your first round pick coming out and doing this, I mean, that's kind of what you expect. And so you're in a better position. If you survived Kyle Pitts last week and you're still going and you saw Puka Nacua this week, you might be asking the world, what have you done? But you've already survived that. And if you didn't survive Kyle Pitts, then you probably don't care anymore. So
Anything is possible. Just keep on setting that best lineup and hope for the best. But let's go ahead and jump in, Jeff. And this is an interesting week. This is when we start getting those Saturday matchups. It feels like they creep up on us every single year. So be sure to set your lineups. Don't put your commissioner in a bind to have to, switch something after the fact because you weren't paying attention. Set your lineups for Saturday. The first game we've got 5 p.m. Eastern. Philadelphia Eagles going into Washington to face off against the Commanders. And we've already got 3 full practices here. So this is a little bit different than typically what we're doing on this Friday show. We have clearer answers about a lot of these players than we typically do. So Saquon Barkley didn't practice on Tuesday. He was dealing with the stinger, off the injury report by now, so he's going to play. Tank Bigsby dealt with an illness early in the week. He is also off the injury report. Jaden Daniels shut down for the year, not officially placed on IR, but they said that his season is over. He will not play again. Still practicing in a limited fashion, but he will not play again. Chris Rodriguez practicing in full all week after missing last week's game with a groin injury. He is also off the injury report. And then Noah Brown placed on IR. It has been a tough season for Noah Brown, who has dealt with multiple injuries. His season will be over. So, Jeff, we're starting to see Saquon Barkley looking a little bit more like his normal self over this last month. He's had some good games and some bad games, but we talked about this a lot leading up to the fantasy playoffs, that he just has a very nice matchup through the fantasy playoffs, and that continues this week. I mean, you're starting Saquon Barkley, like no question about it. But this is a week where I think a lot of people in their rankings have him where we thought he'd be when we drafted him early in round 1. He's got the RB3, RB4, RB5, RB6 on the week. So firing him up with confidence given this matchup, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really obviously he's not going to deliver on the ADP where you drafted him. But at the same time, when you get to the end of the year and you look at the counting stats and all those things, it's going to be one of his better statistical seasons, which is like that. It's funny how
Mhm.
that works. I mean, obviously he didn't deliver on ADP value, but he's still trending towards potentially his fourth best scrimmage yard season. He's still trending towards getting to double digit touchdowns for the fifth time in his career. So you're running, he's 60 yards away from another 1,000 yard season. You're running into these things that the numbers, because he was able to stay healthy all year and give you production, at least moving the ball forward, he's going to end up towards having a better statistical season, but obviously didn't deliver on that ADP. That said, you're still alive with Saquon Barkley. You have to feel better about the spot than you felt for a while. So that is definitely in play.
And what I'll say about a player like Saquon Barkley, and we could talk about Kyle Pitts and other people that might pop up in your memory. Like, if a player performs slightly below expectations. I'm not talking about like a complete tank like what Justin Jefferson has done this year, but like Saquon Barkley has still been giving us low end RB1 production for the entire season. And then if he can give me high end RB1 production through weeks 15, 16, and 17, in my opinion, I like that much better than the guy that's giving me elite production for the first 15 weeks and then craps his pants in week 15. So, like, I am A-okay with this. Like, Saquon Barkley, it's not like he was a huge liability in your lineup. It's not like you weren't getting like RB 36 production from this guy. He had some good weeks and some bad weeks, but overall, like he was still giving you low end RB1 production. Now he has a nice matchup here. The Eagles seem to be finding their footing. So, whatever happened over the previous 4 months, I'm willing to kind of ignore if Saquon Barkley could just look good for these next 2 weeks. And I think that's something that gets lost so much in the discussion when we're like kind of looking back at a macro lens at the entire season. As for the Philadelphia Eagles, I don't know what else there really is to talk about. You're starting AJ Brown, you're starting Devonta Smith. Dallas Goedert might be the interesting one here. We saw Dallas Goedert another 2 touchdown game last week. And it seems like that's it, right? Like Dallas Goedert, you're either getting 18 scoreless yards or you're getting 2 touchdowns and 60 yards. So, like, I don't know if there's been a more boom bust tight end this week. Given the matchup, Jeff, are you expecting more of a boom week or a bust week from Dallas Goedert?
I think anything is in play against this Washington defense. We've seen them struggle all year long and allow big games in fantasy. So it is a little bit, this is how this thing works. And, we did a rookie episode earlier this week. And on that episode, we talked about how Jeremiah Love and Mekhi Lemon were not in the draft yet. And they were literally in the draft like as we were recording. But yes. And so Dallas Goedert is a case where a couple of weeks ago, I wrote about how he had started the year so hot and then really cooled off for a long stretch. And the moment that printed, he has been hot the last couple of weeks, and that's just the game that we play. So yeah, anything I think is in play for the passing game here for the Eagles. The biggest question will be, can the Commanders push them to keep going? Because that's one of the things we didn't see it last week, and it seems to be maybe the Raiders are the only team that we're not seeing against. But if the other offense, if these bad teams, if the offense is not pushing them, then you can just sit on the ball at halftime and you don't end up where you're hoping to see for fantasy. And some other games last week that we saw where Arizona is going to continue to push, even though they're going to lose, that allowed the Texans to have a big fantasy game instead of the ability to just sit on the ball. The big question here, the Commanders side, is can these receivers get going enough against a strong Philadelphia pass defense to allow the Eagles to get to the fantasy upside that they could realize?
So what receivers are you even looking at? We know Marcus Mariota has been respectable. I don't want to take away from what he's done. He's stepped up and he's played formidably in Jaden Daniels' return, but it's Terry McLaurin. That's it, right? Like we can't trust any of the tight ends. Noah Brown is out of the picture. Debo Samuel, I guess you're kind of looking at him as one of those like RB or wide receiver 3 kind of flex players if you're a little bit desperate, but I don't know if we have much faith in anybody in this offense behind Terry McLaurin. And then when you look at the backfield, now that's super muddied up too. Last week we had a little bit of confidence in putting Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt in our lineups because there was no Chris Rodriguez, and we say this all the time. Like we can make sense of 2-headed backfields. It's these 3-headed backfields that really drive us mad. And the way I've got it ranked, I prefer Chris Rodriguez, then I've got Jeremy McNichols, and then I've got Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, but like I don't feel great about that because Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt played well last week, and we've seen that this workload is willing to ebb and flow with whoever is hot and cold at any given time. And right now, I do wonder if Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt did enough last week to warrant more usage. So Chris Rodriguez was a guy who had kind of taken over the backfield heading into the playoffs, but with that week off, I don't have a lot of confidence ranking this one going into week 16.
Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt must be fundamentally failing on some level with the way that he's really been minimized when Chris Rodriguez has been available over the last couple of weeks. You can look at them and see that Krosky-Merritt is the more explosive player. It's just that they've gone with Rodriguez's direction because it must be the pass blocking. It must be something that is allowing Rodriguez to be the lead back there and minimize Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. I think on the passing side, again, the Giants weren't really pushing the Commanders last week, but we saw a hyper-targeted passing attack for Terry McLaurin and for Deebo Samuel, which is what I think we should expect. As much as we want to see a guy like Ben Sennett come out of nowhere and be a contributor there, I think you'll see the targets funneled to those top two targets. But I think when that backfield, Rodriguez is the only guy you consider putting into your lineup right now, and it's really a touchdown-dependent play.
Yeah, completely agree there. So I think we have talked about this game enough, unless you've got any final thoughts here, Jeff. Nope. All right, on to the next one. Packers and Bears, and this is, my goodness, we talk about this as like the injuries being the jumping off point for all of these games that we discuss on Fridays. And this one, there are a lot of injuries to discuss. Matthew Golden, wrist injury. He is off the injury report after practicing in full all week. Josh Jacobs is questionable with a knee and an ankle, has not practiced at all this week. Marshawn Lloyd has yet to practice. He is listed as questionable. Jordan Love practiced in full all week dealing with that left shoulder injury, but he is off the injury report. Jaden Reed's off the injury report. Christian Watson dealing with a chest injury. He is questionable after not practicing on Tuesday and then being limited on Wednesday and Thursday. Dontavian Wicks dealing with an ankle injury. He is also questionable for the and then Savion Williams also dealing with a foot injury. He is off the injury report. So for those keeping score at home, that's basically every single Packers wide receiver is dealing with some sort of ailment this week. For the Bears, we've got Luther Burden out with his ankle injury. Roma Dunze out with a foot injury. DeAndre Swift is questionable. He was able to log some limited practices on Thursday and Friday, so we expect him to play, but listed as questionable. And then Cole Kmet was able to practice in full on Thursday, but also listed as questionable, trending towards playing, but we don't know for sure here. So, Jeff, let's start with the Bears because I think Burden and Adunze both being out is interesting. We have talked so much about this offense that it's so hard to predict who the touches are going to because the ball is spread so thin when you've got Roma Dunze and Luther Burden and DJ Moore and Cole Kmet and Colson Loveland. But now with Dunze and Luther Burden out, I think DJ Moore becomes a very easy start this week, right?
Yeah, we saw the big spot last week from DJ Moore getting those 2 touchdowns. He had that quiet game 2 weeks ago, and then Ben Johnson coming out of that mentioned he was really surprised that DJ Moore had that quiet of a game, and they need to figure out a way to get the ball in his hands. I mean, Dave, you're the Bears fan here, so I might turn it back to you and say, why would we not just expect an absolute rock fight here of, like cold weather, NFC North, everybody is hurt, just 13-10, like it's a Saturday primetime spot. There's a great grand conspiracy out right now about the most bet on anytime touchdowns in primetime games, like always miss, it seems like, for instance, like week 6 on. This feels like a spot where everybody's kind of sitting around loading up their bets for Saturday primetime, and then we just get the most ugly rock fight imaginable because you get the feeling that both of these teams would probably be comfortable driving the game in that direction.
Yeah, I think so. I think the one area that I might push back is that, like, outside of Nixon, the cornerbacks in Green Bay aren't great. And then also, there's good pieces in the secondary in Chicago, but they are susceptible to giving up the big play. So I could see this being one of those where it's like a lot of running to set up for explosive play action plays. So while we might not see 400 yards from either quarterback, I could see some points get put up on the board. These are also offenses or defenses that are very good at generating turnovers. So we could see a lot of drives that are already starting in scoring position. So I could see some points coming just kind of from that respect. But I do think that both teams here are going to want to bleed the clock as much as possible and play the time of possession game. So, I mean, from a fantasy perspective, though, there's still goodness here that I think you want to go after. And I think like Jaden
Yeah.
Reed is a very intriguing player with Christian Watson out. I think DJ Moore, Colson Loveland, those are going to be the two primary targets in the offense. And you could look at touches funneling to them. Of course, Josh Jacobs, if he's active, you're starting him. We'll talk about that a little bit. Emmanuel Wilson is kind of intriguing if we're looking at Josh Jacobs on a pitch count. And then I think both of the running backs, DeAndre Swift and Kyle Monangai for the Bears, we know that we can put both of those guys in too, is kind of, you know, DeAndre Swift giving you a bit of a safer floor, Kyle Monangai with an appealing ceiling. So this, it does feel like these injuries have taken two what have been very muddied teams. Now, just by removing a few key pieces, now all of a sudden it does feel like a much clearer picture on who you're starting in fantasy.
I would agree with you there. I think that, yeah, you feel good with Loveland in the spot. You feel good with DJ Moore. You feel good about the Chicago running backs. The Packers side, we'd love to see a big Jaden Reed game out of somewhere.
Yeah.
For the Josh Jacobs point, to me, it feels like the only reason why he might actually go in this game is just the stakes that are involved in this game. You get the sense that had they been playing maybe like the Falcons or somebody like that, that's kind of like you would think that they'll just play our game, we're going to win this game. Maybe the Falcons aren't a good example, but some of these hapless teams around here, that they would be leaning more towards pulling Jacobs out of this game. And I think that kind of happened earlier in the season because it seems like he's kind of been dealing with the same thing all throughout. And it's a little bit of a pain tolerance, maybe type of an issue. And that might be why he's not practicing. But I think earlier in the year where they had a Thanksgiving game on a short week against Detroit, they didn't play. I think it was against oh God, who am I blaming? I should look it up, but
Lions?
They didn't play Jacobs the week before. No, they played the Lions on Thanksgiving. It was the week before the Lions game that they did
I
not
can't
play
remember
Jacobs.
who it was, but it was not a divisional game, and they rested Jacobs in that one so he could be fresh for the short week turnaround on Thursday. And I can't remember who the team was.
Exactly. Yeah, it was. Gosh, why? And I'm looking at this now, and ESPN, your schedule does not seem correct for the.
It was the Vikings.
Okay.
Vikings was when Josh Jacobs missed. And that, the Vikings were fourth team in the NFC North and not quite as impactful as a game as they had the next week against the Lions.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So, yeah, I think the stakes. The winner of this game takes the NFC North, basically, or is very much in position to take the NFC North. And the winner is in position to lock up a playoff spot. And for the Bears, I think this is a lot bigger game for the Bears because you lose this game. You've got another game coming up against the Lions, who blew you out earlier in the season. You know the Lions are hot on your heels for that number 7 spot in the wild card if you get into that chase. It does seem like the NFC West, 2 teams out of the West are going to run away with that other wild card. So it does kind of seem like it comes down to either the Packers, Lions, or Bears for that last spot. The Packers are a little bit screwy there. It doesn't match up well for the Lions. Having that tie really throws a lot off when it comes to the potential head-to-heads or the potential tiebreakers for a playoff spot. But yeah, this Bears game, you lose this game, you drop to 5 losses. The Lions have 6 losses. The Lions take care of the Steelers this week. And all of a sudden you're looking at a position where the Lions beat you and you are on the outside looking in. Whereas you win this game, you put really the control on the NFC West and potentially lock down that division. So massive spot. Dave, I'm pulling for your team here. I think they're one of the best stories of the year. And I did a little bit of research earlier this week. And right now, the way that the Lions are trending, or if it is the Bears, I mean, this is going to be the best team that doesn't make the playoffs since I go back to 2014 was the last time there was a 10-6 Eagles team that didn't make the playoffs. But we've seen other years where 500 teams have grabbed that last wild card spot. Even in the 16 playoff, we saw some 500 teams grab that 6th spot. So yeah, you're running into here where you could have a very good record and still miss the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be surprising if one of these teams in the NFC North finishes with 12 wins and is on the outside looking in. That's just the way that it's shaken up right now. The NFC North very, very top heavy without a lot of middling teams. It's either like the the conference of the haves and the have-nots, very much so. Well, anything else on this one, Jeff? I think we need to have the we talked about Josh Jacobs a little bit, but let's say we get that report. Jay Glazer always does a fantastic job on Sunday morning, kind of giving us those inside scoops. What happens if 30 minutes before, because this is kind of my expectation, is that like 30 minutes before kickoff, we get that Jay Glazer, hey, Josh Jacobs is going to play, but the team said he's going to be on a pitch count. What should fantasy managers do in that situation?
You've got to look at the rest of your options, and you've got to really this week, every week, but really this week, you've got to recognize this is a Saturday night game, or do you have other options that you feel good about? And I think overall, realizing that anything can happen, sometimes you need to take the game that you can take. And so it really comes down to, do you have other good running backs that you feel good about, other good flex options you feel good about, or do you need to grab this start from Josh Jacobs before these other games go? And so I think that's always the decision point here. But even if Jacobs plays on a pitch count, I mean, you think he's
Still
got
getting
great
the
odds
high
to get in
leverage
the end zone.
opportunities.
So
Yeah,
right,
and
exactly.
that's exactly what I said on yesterday's ranking show, is that like even if he is on a pitch count, I'd expect him to dominate the red zone touches. I think he'll probably cede a lot of that low calorie work to Emmanuel Wilson. So, kind of just like talking through it. I think if you've got a Michael Carter, Kyle Monangai, Kamani Vidal, like you might look at one of those guys as somebody that you'll put in your lineup over Josh Jacobs, but I wouldn't be dipping into like the Samaje Perine, Devin Singletary tier. I think you have to kind of understand what your other options are. We can't just make a blanket statement like start him or sit him.
Well, and again, our friend Chris Harris, I think I say it every single week. What can you
Yeah.
live with here? Because you're in your fantasy playoffs. And if Kamani Vidal, yeah, he's got a nice spot against the Cowboys, but if he goes out there and gives you 6 PPR points, Josh Jacobs has 2 or 3 touchdowns, because we know that's in the range of outcomes, and you're eliminated by 4 points in your fantasy league, what can you live with? Can you live with Josh Jacobs going off on your bench, or can you live with Josh Jacobs giving you an 8-point game in your starting lineup?
Let's move on to the next game here, Jeff. Bills at Cleveland Browns. As far as injuries, there's not a ton here. Dalton Kincaid hasn't practiced this week. David Njoku also hasn't practiced this week. Dylan Sampson hasn't practiced. And then we've got Deshaun Watson practicing in a limited fashion. So, Jeff, Dalton Kincaid, man, like if this guy could just stay healthy, like he to me looks like the best pass catcher on the Bills when he is healthy, when he's feeling it. Like, he can make contested catches, he can make downfield grabs, he can create after the catch, he can do all the things that you want to see from a primary pass catcher. But we talked about this back in like May. There's just always some sort of ailment from like the waist down. It's an ankle or a knee or a hip. Like there's always something going on here. And this is like the third time this year that he has picked up an injury. He dealt with injuries in the preseason as well. Even if he is active in this game, you can't trust him in any lineups, right?
No, you can't. And the reason of it is, if he is active, Dawson Knox has been playing really well and being very involved over the second half of the season. You're about 4.25 targets per game for Dawson Knox over the second half of the year. Even early in the season when Kincaid was healthy, Knox was still leading the team with targets. And I think what happened around that Dolphins game, they really struggled to push the ball downfield. And I think they dedicated to just having guys like Gabe Davis out there, having guys like Terrell Shavers out there that they can able to at least threaten downfield. And then as part of that saying, we are going to involve Knox in the passing game. We had it a little bit previously where Kincaid would be very involved, and if we didn't, we just didn't involve the tight end. I think they made a very conscious decision to say, we're going to have Knox in that spot. We're going to make sure that the tight end is going to be involved regardless of who is in the lineup here. And Knox has really delivered, come through very solidly. Now, this is a game against a Cleveland team that you would think that they could just rely on James Cook and Josh Allen and kind of mix it around, whoever ends up open, and just get out of this game. But we've seen the Bills play down to opponents sometimes this year. So that gives you a little bit of pause.
I feel like I'm going to ask you the same question I ask almost every week regarding the Bills. Any wide receivers that you're tantalized by this week? I mean, like Khalil Shakir kind of falls into that wide receiver 4 range for me. Like, I always have high expectations for this guy because of what he can do after the catch. He's such a fun player to watch, but the usage just hasn't been there consistently. So, Khalil Shakir is my top rated Bills receiver this week, and he is my wide receiver 37, meaning that he is officially a wide receiver 4.
Yeah, I think Shakir, the tough spot is that you're just not seeing red zone involvement. You're not seeing big splash plays because of the role that he plays. He plays one of these roles that if he got another 4 or 5 targets per game, yeah, we would feel great about it, but we don't see that. So you're not seeing the volume go any direction here in Buffalo. I mean, Shakir is the play if you are going to go a receiver in this game. If you can play any receivers or you have to play a receiver, it would be Shakir. But yeah, you wish that there would be a splash play attached with that. A guy like Rashid Shaheed or something like that, that you can give me one play that makes you worth the week, and then I'll live with the lower volume. It's just that Shakir is kind of the Dollar General version of the very cheap Amon-Ra St. Brown. You're just not getting the volume, and it's the type of a role that needs the volume to be able to get there.
So looking at the
I will say
Browns,
one
yeah,
touchdown for Shakir does give him some money and a contract incentive. So if
there you
this
go.
starts to roll, you kind of feel like maybe Josh is going to get his guy a touchdown there.
There you go. Looking at the Browns, we saw Isaiah Bond with a couple of big catches last week. Jerry Judy continues to get the most worthless, hefty share of targets imaginable in the league. This is one for me. Like I'm kind of, it's same but different. We talk about the Bills not trusting any of the wide receivers, and that's because Josh Allen is playing so well and spreading the ball so thin. Looking at the Browns, we don't trust any of the wide receivers just because the quality of the targets hasn't been very good. But I think Harold Fannin is the one guy that you can like. What a story. He has been phenomenal, whether he's playing with or without David Njoku, who has been dealing with different injuries all season long. Harold Fannin has just kind of been a smash start. Like I've got this guy inside my top six. It'll be really interesting kind of seeing where the discussion is this offseason about Harold Fannin, assuming they can do something about the quarterback position. I mean, Harold Fannin's going to be a guy that I expect to have on a lot of fantasy teams next year.
Yeah, he tied Kevin Johnson for the most catches for a Browns rookie. So just period, not tight end, just rookie period. And he needs to get it's just over 7 tech catches per game, which is what he's done over the last 2 weeks, 7.5 the last 2 weeks. To get up to about 89 would be a magic number for him. If he were to get to 89, it would tie Ozzie Newsome and Kellen Winslow, the second for the most catches by a Browns tight end in franchise history. It would also move him past Sam Laporta's 86 catches for the second most receptions ever by a rookie tight end.
Wow. And this is a guy who fell quite a bit in the draft because of an awkward gait and some poor athletic testing. But what was it, 1,500 something yards last year at Bowling Green? I mean, like,
Yeah.
just watch the tape. This guy was unbelievable last year at Bowling Green. And like, it didn't matter that he's got, a little bow-leggedness to his gait. Like, he does just fine out there in the NFL.
Yeah, and there's a lot in play here with obviously the rookie narrative with Shadur Sanders and
Mhm.
obviously a relationship there, but also as well you've got the struggle. It's kind of he's the Jonnu Smith of this year, where this offense is just so hopelessly broken that it's just struggle targets to Harold Fannin to any attempt to move the ball. Quinshon Judkins, this is hypothetically on paper a good spot for Quinshon Judkins against what has been a weak Buffalo defense against the run. Judkins has just really struggled with any level of efficiency
Yeah.
since the early part of the season. And I think that the wear and tear is really adding on Judkins. The Browns just feel like the way that they performed the last couple of weeks, they're counting for the season to be over. And the Bills know that they can't let up anything at this point in time of trying to still win that AFC East, coming off of that big comeback win against the Patriots. So yeah, this would be a spot that you would think, again, it's just the Bills that James Cook and Josh Allen, and then having Harold Fannin coming back the other direction.
Yeah, and Quinton Judkins, you talk about it, good matchup. Last week was a good matchup as well, where every other running back was hurt, playing in Chicago in a weather game, back-to-back games with less than 2 yards per carry. So I think you're onto something there with, just the wear and tear kind of adding or piling up on him. So let's move on to the next game here, Jeff. Chargers at Cowboys, another game with quite a few injuries. Keenan Allen got a rest day, so no concern there. But Trey Harris has been limited with a hip injury. Justin Herbert still on the injury report with that left hand injury after undergoing surgery a couple of weeks ago. He's been playing through it and he's practicing in full. Quentin Johnson dealing with a groin injury has been limited. Sounds like he probably could make a return, but we don't. We're just kind of speculating at this point. CeeDee Lamb has yet to practice dealing with an illness. Phil Maffa limited with a shoulder injury. Javonte Williams limited with a neck injury, and then Jake Ferguson practicing in full. So, Jeff, I don't know where you want to start with this one. I know where to start with this one. Talked briefly about this with Alfredo Brown in yesterday's rankings episode. Everybody is just bought in to the Chargers this week. And I understand, it's a good matchup for the Cowboys, but I was looking on football guys rankings, and we've got him as, I believe, the QB3. I was looking on Fantasy Pros, and I think they've got him at like QB5. I don't know where this excitement's coming from. Like, sure, the Chargers have been winning games and this is a good matchup, but Justin Herbert has been the QB 29 on a per game basis without Joe Alt. He's coming off an 11-point fantasy performance last week. I don't know. Like, when I'm looking at my rankings, I'm in a league where I'm starting JJ McCarthy over Justin Herbert, but it seems like the entire consensus has just decided that this is the bounce back game for Justin Herbert. I don't know about you, Jeff, but I'm just not there.
No, I mean, I feel like I'm being generous to rank Justin Herbert as quarterback 13 this week based upon the performances that he's put up. And it's really, it's another one of these that you get the midseason, the early season narrative that they're airing it out and all these things. This is so unexpected from this Greg Roman, Jim Harbaugh offense of what we thought that we would have. And then as soon as that happens, it flips to being exactly what we would expect from the Greg Roman and Jim Harbaugh team, basically just win these games ugly, muddy it up, and losing those tackles are huge. But you've seen, I mean, you haven't gotten anything out of Justin Herbert. And because there's so many options in this Chargers passing attack, you haven't gotten anything from any of them. So, and I think part of that too, you're running into two narratives here where you're running into the early season Chargers explosive offense narrative. You're also running into the early season play everybody against the Cowboys narrative. And I know that Quinton Williams, I think, is supposed to be out of this game. It's just that the Cowboys have been much, much better over the second half of the season. They obviously added some impact pieces at the trade deadline. The team has been better there. So this hasn't been this defense that we want to target in every single matchup anymore. And it's something that we had talked about earlier this week or throughout different things that we've done content on, how often the narrative of the early season gets locked into stone, and you need to recognize that things change. And the Cowboys, that matchup has changed. Now, I think Quinton Williams being out is a big, big key in that change, because that was a big catalyst for them locking down on that run game.
He hasn't been declared out yet, and he's going through concussion protocol, but he did return to practice yesterday and practice in a limited fashion. So we see that often, that the Thursday limited is followed. Fantasy, I mean, good for the Cowboys, but then we see that like that Thursday limited is often followed by a Friday full practice and an activation. Even if he doesn't practice in full, he has a chance on Saturday to still clear concussion protocol. So yeah, that's exactly what I said again, on a show earlier this week, just saying that like the biggest weakness for the Chargers has been their offensive line. And over the last few weeks, looking at what the Dallas defense has been able to do with Kenny Clark and Quinton Williams and pressuring the quarterback, I don't see this as a great matchup. So I don't know, like maybe I could have egg all over my face when this weekend is over and Justin Herbert hangs 35 points, but we just haven't seen it. Like, this is a 9-game sample without Joe Alt. And since the hand injury to Justin Herbert, it's been even worse. Like, we're looking at this guy averaging like 13 points per game over the last few weeks. I understand some excitement and hope for bounce back, but I am just not there. So here, you said you've got him at QB 13. I've got him a few spots lower at QB 16, but I've got JJ McCarthy, Bo Nix, Jordan Love, Jared Goff, CJ Stroud, Brock Purdy, Jackson Dart, all players that I have ranked ahead of Justin Herbert. So I can't make the decision for you. I can't set your lineup for you. You have to make these decisions yourself. I'm just not there on ranking Justin Herbert as a top half of the QB1 conversation based on what we've seen this year.
Yeah. And I think just the bigger point on that of we haven't seen where the Chargers want it to be that. I think the Chargers are very happy playing these rock fight ball control. And when you're playing against the Cowboys, we know how explosive that offense can be. That's probably your intention of what you want to do to the Cowboys offense, to slow them down, to not get into a shootout with them, recognizing the limitations on your quarterback because of the injuries and because of your offensive line. You're going to walk into this game wanting to control it via the run game, wanting to keep the do those time of possession things that drive us so crazy in fantasy. So I think that's the bigger conversation there of it really would come down to, I think, this Dallas offense performing at a level that pushes it into that game. But we've seen this Chargers defense be very strong, be a good defense. And it really plays into complementary football, the way that they've been winning games the second half of the season.
George Pickens, 70 scoreless yards over the last 2 weeks. Any reservations about getting him in lineups this week?
I think there has to be, because again, this is a Chargers team that has been good against wide receivers. And so I think that adds some pause there. I know Pickens mentioned in the coming out of the Thanksgiving game, he mentioned that he's dealing with an injury.
Mhm.
And I think that that's another thing that we get wrong so often is we see the guy out there, and so we assume a previous level of play, but you can watch the tape of guys that are playing with an injury are not moving in the way that they have previously. And I think for the Cowboys, it really comes down to the way that we saw the Vikings shut them down in the second half of that game. We saw that the Dallas's offense looked strong in the first half of that game last week, but then the second half that defense, Brian Flores' defense, really settled in there. And so I think that you're feeling like you've not gotten it from Pickens the last couple of weeks. Really, CeeDee Lamb could have had two massive games these past 2 weeks because of the way he started the first half of those games, but then he had the concussion against Detroit, and then he had shutting down against the Vikings. And so you're feeling a little bit flat from what you've gotten from both sides of this game.
So we got a good question here in the chat, Jeff, that ties in with this game, and I'm laughing. He says that you sound like a character from Goodfellas, and that
I'm
is,
struggling.
yeah, man. Shout out for waking up early and doing this today. We double checked before recording. I was, Jeff, you sure you get to do this today? And you said you were here. So Jeff Bell in his flu game, but I think this is a good question. And I already checked my rankings, and I don't have a strong take here. I've got them back to back in my rankings, but the question is Omarion Hampton or RJ Harvey this week. We're currently talking about this game. So Omarion Hampton obviously facing off against Dallas, RJ Harvey facing off against Jacksonville. Jeff, I don't know. I know you know because you do this article every single week tracking this sort of usage. I don't think the average person realizes how split this backfield has been over the last 2 weeks. It has been a 48-52 and a 45-55 split between Omarion Hampton and Kamani Vidal, slightly in favor of Omarion Hampton, but this is what Greg Roman wants. This is what we've seen every step of his career as a coach or a coordinator. He is always wanting to split the backfield. So we're seeing that now. And we talked about this last week, right? That like Najee Harris was supposed to be the split back with Omarion Hampton. When he went down, they kind of scrambled and they just thrusted Omarion Hampton into this workhorse role. He got injured. Kamani Vidal showed that he is capable of being an NFL back. And I think we're going to see this kind of 45-55 split through the remainder of the playoffs. Now, Hampton does get a lot of the goal line work, and he's got big play upside. So we still want to start him as an RB2, but he is not that top 5 guy that we had hoped he'd be when Najee Harris initially went down.
We are seeing that split, but it's kind of reminiscent of what we saw for a lot of the season out of the Bengals, where Chase Brown is the split and the guy touching the ball, or with the Jaguars with having LaQuint Allen passing down snaps and playing a lot of snaps, but not touching the ball so much, or what we probably know best, this Baltimore backfield in the past where you've had Derrick Henry and then Justice Hill. It does seem like Vidal is kind of falling into that passing down role, that guy that is out there splitting the snaps 50-50, but Hampton is the guy that we want to run with the ball. And I think that that's the way the Chargers, at least coming out of last week, played out. That being said, we do run into a dangerous game of adjusting too much to last week, because you run into a situation where maybe it was a hot hand, or maybe it was an intention of a game plan and they're going to switch it up. When you go too hard off of the previous week, you got to remember the offensive coordinator is trying to trick the defense, and they might be going too hard off the previous week. And so, but I think that, I think you definitely feel better about Hampton here in the spot than Vidal. Vidal would be a desperation only, but the matchup arguably might be there. But Hampton, really, we saw last week get the volume in the run game.
Before we move on to the next game, if you're watching this on YouTube, do us a favor right now. We are live streaming this. The best way to get more people to watch the show is to give us a like if you're watching it on mobile. Down where you see the comments section, do us an even bigger favor. What you can do is swipe right, and it'll say hype this video. Go ahead and do that, and that helps us even more. And for the audio listeners, if you're listening to this after we have live streamed it, we get this out immediately following the live stream. Do us a favor and help us out with an audio review on Apple Podcasts. The best ways you can help us on YouTube, liking the video. The best way you can help us on Apple Podcasts is by leaving a review. So please, give us a little Christmas gift and help us out there if you feel so inclined. Jeff, let's move on to the next game here. New York Jets at New Orleans Saints. Mason Taylor has yet to practice this week, dealing with a neck injury after missing last week's game as well. So hoping that he can have a speedy recovery. Justin Fields back at practice in a limited fashion. Tyrod Taylor back at practice in a limited fashion as well. Brees Hall practicing in full through a knee issue. For the Saints, we've got Alvin Kamara still not practicing, Devon Bailey not practicing as well, dealing with a shoulder injury. Tyler Shuck practicing in full, but he's on the injury report with a hip. And then Devin Neal, who was really starting to break out, looking like the workhorse in Alvin Kamara's absence, placed on IR after picking up a hamstring injury last week. So, Jeff, let's start with the Saints backfield here. The question everybody wants to know, Audric Estime or, oh my goodness, I'm drawing a blank right now, Evan Hull. Audric Estime or Evan Hull. Who do you prefer this week?
Alvin Kamara, but I don't think that's going to happen. But
I don't know if that's going to happen at all this year.
yeah, I think it's, fundamentally, hypothetically, when I look at the skill sets in this backfield, I would think that Hull would be the receiving back. And maybe that's just me like stereotyping there, because he had no targets last week. We saw Estime get 3 targets last week. So yeah, you would think Hull would be the receiving back and Estime would be a little bit more of the early down back, but Estime getting the 3 targets last week, you would think Estime would profile more towards the goal line back. Maybe it's one of these, just like we talked about with the Chargers, where they're going to split the snaps, but then Hull kind of is more maybe pass block. I don't know. It really is.
The weird thing is that Estime did get the passing down work last
Yeah,
week, which is so not what you'd expect.
That's where the whole thing is very bizarre. Yeah.
So what I will say is, I'm not at practices. I'm not covering the Saints in depth, but Nick Underhill does really good work. And I saw somebody had asked him, just said, hey, fantasy managers everywhere are asking, who do you expect to be the lead guy this week? And he didn't give a huge ringing endorsement, but he said probably Audric Estime. So take that for what you will. I've got Audric Estime as a high-end wide receiver 4. I've got Evan Hull as a high-end running back 5. Sorry, not wide receivers. These are running backs we're talking about here. I don't feel great about either of them. And I understand there are some desperate managers out there that are saying I need something, and I get it, but I don't know, man. I'm looking, I don't know if any of these people are available on waivers that I have ahead of Audric Estime, but I've got Audric Estime in the same tier that I have Amari DeMercado and Tyler Algier and Jordan Mason and Tajay Spears and other guys that you're not feeling too great about starting this week.
Yeah, and I do think this is one of those situations where we tend to might get excited about an Audric Estime because it's a spot start, but then the context gets lost in that. And then we get into Sunday morning doing the start sit show, and all of a sudden people are asking about, hey, should I play Jaylen Warren or Audric Estime, or should I be playing Ashton Genty or Audric Estime? And to be clear, Estime, if he is the lean here, is way behind a guy like a Rico Dowdle or something like that. But that is where you end up when you start to talk about these spot starts out of context, that maybe you're playing in a very deep league and you got him off waivers and you've been really struggling at that running back too. And you're excited that you're sending that tweet that, I'm excited I have somebody with a heartbeat that might touch the ball to me by running back 2 in this matchup, and the context gets lost in it. And you all of a sudden the general crowd starts to ask themselves some questions they never should be asking themselves.
So we got another Brady Cook start here for the Jets. Dare I say he didn't look terrible last week? I mean, I had very low expectations for Brady Cook. He looked okay. And I think most exciting is that he was able to keep Adonai Mitchell afloat. 9 targets, had a decent receiving total, found himself a touchdown as well. So, I thought the whole Adonai Mitchell run had just come crashing down with Tyrod Taylor out. But, we're still looking at Adonai Mitchell. I'm not saying he's a must start by any means, but still very much so in that wide receiver 3 discussion with a lot of other boom bust players.
He is, and you get the sense that basically the coaching staff is saying, we've seen enough from Cook, and given his contract situation, he's going to be our backup next year. So let's give him these reps. Right. Tyrod Taylor and Justin Fields are not going to be here next year. So we don't need to play you guys. And then allowing John Mechie, allowing Isaiah Williams, allowing Adonai Mitchell, most importantly, to be the receivers, to get them some reps. Really, it feels like the Jets are basically playing next year's backups should everything go right, just to get these young guys some experience in a lost season. I think the thing, I would not expect Brees Hall to be with the Jets next year, but we had seen him have some solid weeks. He's fallen apart the last 2 weeks, and we saw a more even split than we have all year with Isaiah Davis last week. And so if you're kind of playing this game with Brady Cook and you're kind of playing this game with these wide receivers, you're probably getting Isaiah Davis more work than he has in the past and diminishing Brees Hall's role. I really enjoy Patrick Doherty from NBC,
Yeah.
and he's great, and everything he does with Denny Carter, fantastic. I laughed a little bit because I saw a tweet and he said that Brees Hall is the most disappointing running back out of this year, and he's the running back 17. His ADP is running back 16. It's like it leaves you flat because it didn't hit, but it's like he's kind of right at ADP. But I hear you, absolutely.
Anything else to talk about with this game? The I feel like this is another one. Like you're starting Chris Olave, starting Juwan Johnson. We kind of talked about the Jets wide receivers and the Jets running backs and the Saints running backs, and I think those are really kind of the inflection points here. I don't know if there's too much else to talk about in this game, unless there's anything I'm missing, Jeff.
I think mentioning Juwan Johnson, I do appreciate that mention because you see Devon Bailey out of here, and you got to realize Devon Bailey has been getting a lot of volume the last couple of weeks. And so to plug a Kevin Austin or to plug Mason Tipton, who I think I just saw in the injury report as well, but to plug some of these guys in, that, I mean, you're way desperate there. I think just the more better approach would be a little bit more volume, maybe to Chris Olave, a little bit more volume to Juwan Johnson, which might break some ties when you're looking at your wide receiver rankings or tight end rankings of who, or tight end streamer who you're going to put in that spot.
Yeah, and I see Fantasy Meatball in the chat talking about playing the Saints defense this week. I do like that as well. I think it's going to be a very conservative game plan for the Jets, but I don't think there's going to be a lot of scoring. There could be some turnovers here. So talked about that before the playoffs started, that the Saints were one of those, a really nice matchup through the playoffs. I mean, this is kind of a set and forget week 15, 16, and 17 schedule if you want to go that route. I know a lot of people, aren't lucky enough to get these smash Houston defenses that you can just play every single week. So if you're fishing on the waiver wire, the Saints in this matchup are a nice one. Let's move on to the next game here, Jeff. We've got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers facing off against the Carolina Panthers in a fight for the lowly NFC South right now. Mike Evans, he got, this is kind of funny how the, I get these directly from the official team websites, and we got Mike Collins got a DNP on Wednesday, but it says collarbone/rest. Chris Godwin got a DNP on Thursday, but it says fibula/rest. So I do appreciate the Bucks for putting this injury report together because, if we just saw Mike Evans with the collarbone and we saw Chris Godwin with a fibula not practicing, we'd be panicking a little bit. But the Buccaneers staff was nice enough to let us know that this isn't anything serious. They're just kind of chalking this up as rest days for their veterans. Cade Otton limited on Wednesday, practiced in full on Thursday. He's dealing with a knee injury for the Panthers. We've got Tedero McMillan, a DNP early in the week, but practiced in full on Thursday. So Jeff, let's start with the Tampa Bay wide receivers here. They're back to being the Bucks of old. It's going through Mike Evans. It's going through Chris Godwin. This unfortunately pushes Mecca Buka way down into kind of flex consideration. Tez Johnson doesn't even crack my top 100 receivers this week. Sterling Shepard has been pushed completely off the radar. I mean, there's so many guys that were just kind of popping up throughout the season that we were looking at as viable streamers in this Tampa Bay offense. But now that they luckily have a healthy Mike Evans and a healthy Chris Godwin, that's who the targets are flown to in this offense again, right?
Absolutely. And you've got Jalen McMillan looked good last week. So you've got him as the wide receiver 4 there. Yep. And so, yeah, Sterling Shepard and Tez Johnson probably won't even play very much, or if even Tez Johnson's active in this game. Yeah, you're getting the top receivers.
21% of the snaps last week. That was his lowest since week 1. So, I mean, you got some good production from Tez Johnson in the middle of the season, but yeah, it's over for him.
McMillan looked good. McMillan looked good last week in limited opportunities.
Big touchdown.
Yeah, he was. And it's a big matchup here, and maybe Evans draws JC Horn and puts him in a bad spot. But it felt like last week, I know there was a lot of talk during the broadcast about Evans, that 1,000-yard streak ending. He needs like 234 yards per game, so it's not impossible. But it did feel like last week that Baker was like, "We're going to still try to get you there, buddy." And so that was what you saw there. Volume going to Evans, big plays down the field. I mean, Godwin, he got a touchdown last week that saved a little bit. You haven't gotten the big booms that we had last year with Godwin when he was early in the season, when he was the wide receiver 3 overall. Haven't seen that. You're getting a Buka kind of in the role that we expected him to play all along with these receivers now. And this, you're getting a Bucks offense that's as healthy as it's been all year. That being said, you watch these guys and it's like, you can tell they're all hurt, that they're all putting it out there, that they're pushing towards the playoffs. It's the healthiest that they've been, but you can also see that they're all still hurt, that they're playing through it.
So talking about backfields that people might not realize are split, we talked about the Chargers a little bit earlier. Carolina Panthers, this is very much so a 50-50 split now. Rico Dowdle has started to cede some work to Chuba Hubbard, who has distanced himself from that calf injury a little bit. And over the last 2 weeks, Chuba Hubbard is averaging 5.8 yards per touch to Rico Dowdle's 3.9. So we saw in the middle of the year when Rico Dowdle got these starts against Dallas and Miami, he was able to feast, putting up one of the best 2 game stretches in NFL history. But since then, Chuba Hubbard has come back. He has slowly gotten healthier and healthier. And now this is this frustrating kind of 55-45 split all of the sudden. And I don't want to say that you're benching Rico Dowdle. I think you can still get him in your lineup. He still gets a lot of the preferred work near the goal line, but Chuba Hubbard comes in and gets a lot of the passing down work. He's getting more involved as well. So now Chuba Hubbard, where he was dropped in a lot of leagues, now I think he is kind of back in that wide receiver 3 consideration as a guy that you can look at as kind of a risky start.
This is where I'm going to push back on you, Dave, because last week, actually, we did coming out of a bye. So that Carolina Panthers had that very late bye. We did see the volume go back to Rico Dowdle coming out of that bye. We saw Rico Dowdle handle 16 carries to 8 for Chuba Hubbard. So coming out of the bye, it shifted a little bit more back towards the direction of Dowdle being the lead back and Hubbard being the supporting back. And so this is where one of those, you're exactly right, of what we saw coming into the bye, coming out of the bye, came back a little bit more towards Dowdle's direction. But that being said, it's small sample size theater. You could exactly be right. It easily could be a 50-50 split again, or it could be we had the bye, we had a chance to reset. Rico Dowdle feels a little bit better, and so we wanted to push him back more towards that lead back role, whereas we recognized previously it was starting to wear on him a little bit.
Yeah, and I think that is, a poignant response. I was looking at, a couple of games rather than just last week coming out of the bye, and also routes run were split 50-50. So, it seems like Chuba Hubbard was a little bit more involved as a receiver, but they are splitting that receiving work 50-50. So I prefer Rico Dowdle in my rankings. I've got him as an RB2, but I still have Chuba Hubbard kind of in that RB3/flex consideration as a guy who can catch some passes. And like I said, has shown a little bit more juice with the yards per touch metrics. I don't know what else there is to talk about here, Jeff. We're starting Bucky Irving, of course. Rashad White, desperation flex territory is a guy who is still somewhat involved in the passing game. Sean Tucker, also in desperation flex territory, is somebody who can fall into the end zone. Those are both very narrow bands to get a positive outcome. So if you're looking at Rashad White and Sean Tucker, you're probably pretty desperate. Looking at the Panthers, of course, we're starting Tedero McMillan. Jalen Coker falls into that kind of desperation streamer territory. Is there anything else we're missing from this one, Jeff?
I think Coker is the call out there. We're seeing him the last couple of weeks. He's really started to put it together. And that's really just because he's connected with touchdowns, but he's the wide receiver 15 over the last 2 weeks, getting those touchdowns. We know this is a lower volume Panthers passing attack, but they're going up against a very stout run defense in Tampa Bay. So you would think there might be there. And for reasons only known to me, I really need over these last 3 weeks, Bryce Young to get 6 touchdown passes. So we're going to put out in the world, get 2 or 3 touchdowns here in this game, Bryce. We're putting 6 touchdowns out into the world here, Bryce Young. Get me home.
All right, let's go out to the next one here, Jeff. We got the Minnesota Vikings going up against the New York Giants. Jalen Naylor was limited in practice. All of the fantasy relevant Giants players that aren't on IR are healthy this week. So not a ton to talk about as far as injuries here. But JJ McCarthy, I alluded to it earlier. I have him as my QB 15 on the week, 1 spot ahead of Justin Herbert. JJ McCarthy quietly starting to look pretty good and has some rushing upside that is appealing in fantasy as well. I think people may have been a little bit too quick to put a nail in McCarthy's coffin after like his 6th NFL start. People had just deemed him a bust, and now here he is starting to look like a guy who has a few NFL starts under his belt, starting to feel a little bit more confident. There's still, a lot of progress and development, of course, but JJ McCarthy starting to look okay over these last couple of weeks.
He absolutely has been to everybody except for Justin Jefferson. And that's the most bizarre thing imaginable because yes, he's looked really good to everybody but Jefferson. And for whatever reason, he's just missing Jefferson, or Jefferson's dropping a ball in the end zone. It just can't connect. And so, yeah, that's the frustrating thing here where we're seeing things start to go together. do not get cute with Jalen Naylor out there. I don't think. I mean, he had
Yeah.
2 touchdowns last week, and I do think that there might be something to the rivalry narrative with Jalen Naylor being a Michigan State Spartan and JJ McCarthy being a Michigan Wolverine. I don't know, but Naylor going up against what has been a defense that people do target. We talked about it earlier. The Dallas Cowboys defense had 2 touchdowns there. I think the Jefferson is so hard to recommend somebody putting them on your bench, because if you get a Justin Jefferson game, then you're the idiot that told somebody to sit Justin Jefferson in the fantasy playoffs. But if you look at what has happened the last 3 weeks, really most of the second half of the season, most with JJ McCarthy at quarterback, not been there at all. And you can make the argument that this is a prime matchup. You can make that argument the last 2 weeks against the Commanders and the Cowboys that was a prime matchup as well, and Jefferson didn't deliver there. I think an interesting piece is in this backfield. We're seeing Jordan Mason start to take a larger role, and whereas Aaron Jones was trending more towards almost bell cow usage, and I think that's a product of Mason looked really good when given limited opportunities. And I think the coaching staff saying, you struggled when you were the primary bell cow back earlier in the season, but now you got a chance to reset, learn our offense a little bit better, and you've earned more opportunities. So, I mean, this should be a spot that against the Giants defense that's allowed a lot. You're playing the Vikings that you have, but yeah, Jefferson is just, please, can we get one game out of Jefferson?
I know. And it's so tough. Like we keep saying every single week, like there's always reasons to start Justin Jefferson. It's like, well, he's got a good matchup, or this receiver's injured, or JJ McCarthy has looked better. But for whatever reason, it just is not panning out. And you talk about it, like all these near misses, like drop touchdowns, like that game against the Bears, like JJ McCarthy threw a dime to Justin Jefferson on what would have been like a 40-yard touchdown. But you get this like Herculean interception from Nashawn Wright. Like it is always just something where it's just like right on the precipice of this blow up game for Jefferson, but we just haven't seen it yet. So, we could talk about where we have him ranked, but like I don't even see the purpose. Like I've got him as a high end wide receiver 3. I've got DJ Moore and Michael Wilson, Jacoby Myers, Chris Godwin, Marvin Harrison, like a lot of guys that I feel more confident of ahead of him. I don't want to tell you to bench Justin Jefferson just for the same reason you said. Like, you don't want to be the guy that says to bench Justin Jefferson, but like if you have been rostering him all year, you know what it's been like, and it's been tough sledding so far. For the New York Giants, we've got a question here from Fantasy Meatball. And he says he thinks he might be overthinking this. I think he might be overthinking this as well, Jeff. Jalen Coker or Wan'Dale Robinson?
Wan'Dale Robinson. Michael, I absolutely love you. Michael, you're fantastic, and you're lighting up the chat, and it's great. You're overthinking a lot of lineups that you're putting here in this chat. Like you mentioned that you played Parkinson over Kyle Pitts, and my heart goes out to you, buddy. But like, take a deep breath, man. You got this thing. You know it. Play your guys. You know it. So I do want to say that. But this chat,
I've got Wan'Dale Robinson as
job of the chat.
I got Wan'Dale Robinson as a high-end wide receiver too this week. Like he's been, just that. He's been a high-end wide receiver too, basically this entire season. So yeah, I'm starting him with a little bit more confidence in this one. Tyrone Tracy, Jeff, we saw that touchdown regression finally hit last week, and this is something you and I have both been talking about. That like people, we talk about all these backfields that are split that people might not be aware of. I don't think the Giants backfield has been that split. Like the expected fantasy points for Tyrone Tracy have been fantastic. He has just lost out on touchdowns to Devin Singletary, but we kept saying like, just chase the usage. Like Tyrone Tracy is getting near workhorse treatment. And last week that touchdown regression hit a little bit. So this is another one. Like if you've got Tyrone Tracy, you're just plugging him into your lineups without thinking twice. Jeff, I'm in a league right now where, I was a very good dynasty team. I was one of the top seeds. I got a round 1 bye, but I just needed a little bit of extra ammunition in my second flex spot. This is a league with very deep rosters. I traded what is projected to be a late 2026 second round pick for Tyrone Tracy, somebody that I'm immediately using as a starter. Do you think I overpaid, or do you think that's a pretty good price for a little extra ammunition in the playoffs?
No, and that's the direction that I like to go. If you're going to acquire somebody for a little bit more ammunition, I think that it's natural to look at like older veterans, like, and like get something, but to spend that draft capital to go out and get somebody that moving forward, you think could be a piece of your team, I think is the correct way to go. there. And I do hat tip to you because you got it right. You were exactly right that it was Tyrone Tracy usage. I thought that it was a little bit more split with what we had seen from the last couple of weeks of Devin Singletary. It really is a bell cow situation for Tracy. I mean, you're playing Tracy. I think Wandale, it's there, but this Vikings defense has turned it on the second half of the year. And so I am nervous overall about the fantasy aspects of the Giants game.
So it's funny you mentioned that. My wife, I help her with some of her fantasy teams. She does 90% of the work herself, but every once in a while, I'll give her a little like, hey, make sure you pick up Jackson Dart in all your leagues and whatnot. So she is somebody who has Jackson Dart on almost every single one of her fantasy teams. And she told me that. She said, I'm kind of nervous about this Vikings matchup. And I pulled up his game log and I said, this guy has faced so many tough defenses this year. And we always have this like, we want to bench Jackson Dart. I don't know why. Like it always feels like we should. Like there's always reasons to bet against him, but he just keeps turning out QB1 week after QB1 week. So yeah, like I remember I wanted to bench him going up against Denver and he put up 32 points. Like it just doesn't matter. So I know there's a lot of people right now wanting to bench Jackson Dart, but like I feel like he's kind of at the point now, Jeff. He's the QB2 in per game scoring behind only Josh Allen this year. Like, I don't think people realize how good he has been. I feel like even with a tough matchup, complex blitz packages, everything they're going to throw at Jackson Dart, I feel like he's just done enough at this point that you can kind of say he's matchup proof and you just need to get him in your lineups.
I would agree there. I do have trepidation against the Vikings defense, but I
do too. I've had trepidation in a lot of matchups this year, and Jackson Dart has just continued to give his top 5, top 6 production week after week after week, and it feels kind of fake because he just scores a touchdown, a rushing touchdown, almost every single week. But at the same time, like if he's going to keep doing it, it feels silly to bet against him. So here, let me throw one out to you, Jeff, and I think this is one where people might have both of these guys on their roster because right around the time Jackson Dart got hurt, Jacoby Brissett took over as the starter and really started to heat up. Who would you prefer this week? Jackson Dart with this tough matchup against Minnesota or Jacoby Brissett going up against Atlanta? Two guys who have both just turned in QB1 production every single week.
Brissett, I will get to it, but I really like both sides of this Atlanta-Arizona game for a potential shootout.
All right. I think we covered everything in this one, so let's move on to the Chiefs and Tennessee Titans. Patrick Mahomes out for the year with an ACL and LCL injury, so hoping that he will be back early next season. But from what I was reading, that additional damage, the LCL, adds a little bit to the recovery. So hoping him a quick and speedy recovery. We'll talk about that much this offseason. Gardner Minshew is going to get the start in Patrick Mahomes' spot. Rashee Rice has yet to practice this week with a concussion. Marquise Brown got a personal day earlier in the week. Juju Smith-Schuster, he's practicing full through a rib injury. For the Titans, we've got Gunnar Helm limited in practice with a toe injury, and then Chigga getting that typical rest day on Wednesday. But, Jeff, we got to talk about the Chiefs here, man. Rashee Rice, Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, like I got into quite a few first-round buys with some semblance of those guys. I've got one league where I have Patrick Mahomes, Rashee Rice, Travis Kelce stack. I got another one where it's just Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce. Another one that's Patrick Mahomes and Rashee Rice. Now, all of a sudden, after this first-round buy, I'm going into round 2, and I'm starting J.J. McCarthy and Jacoby Brissett and Michael Carter and all these guys that did not help me get into the playoffs. So what do fantasy managers do here? Like, to me, it seems like Rashee Rice probably isn't playing this week. Like, trending to back-to-back DNPs to start the week dealing with the concussion is not a good sign. Patrick Mahomes obviously not playing. Travis Kelce, I don't know if you heard recently, he was doing this interview where he was not talking about the Chiefs in any sort of possessive manner. There was no we, there was no us. It was all the Chiefs and them and what they're going to do next year. I mean, it seems to me like Travis Kelce's checked out. Rashee Rice probably isn't playing this week. Gardner Minshew's getting the start. This doesn't feel good for anybody who has been relying on any Chiefs players going into week 16.
I'm cautiously optimistic on Kelce here because maybe he has divorced the idea of the team. Maybe some of these blowups with Andy Reid are real, but at the same time, we saw Gardner Minshew last year feeding Brock Bowers very heavily. We saw Gardner Minshew at the end of last week feeding Kelce. Kelce's chasing some historical numbers here where he needs 98 receiving yards to pass Jason Witten for the second most all time for a tight end. And then he moved into 10th place last week, catching 7 passes. moving to past Reggie Wayne into 10th place all time. He needs 7 more catches to jump Anquan Bolden and Terrell Owens to move into 8th place all time. So you get the sense a little bit of like, maybe we'll send Kelsey out right of does feed his numbers here, and Minshew just kind of go in that direction. I mean, the backfield at some point, like, why just play? I'm not there on Dynasty Brain on Rashad Smith being this hidden gem anymore, but at the same time, what do you have to lose? You've got both Isaiah Pacheco and Kareem Hunt do not have contracts. You got Smith is the only back under contract next year. I expect them to go make a splash in free agency with the running
Kenneth
back
Walker,
position.
Travis
Yeah,
Etienne.
because
Yeah.
you talk about Mahomes there. If you got Mahomes coming in off an ACL, you would think like, hey, let's go get him a running back here that can handle some of this and support him there. But you would think. And so they'll draft some guy in the 7th round, and it'll be Rashad Smith, and they'll bring back Kareem Hunt, and it'll all be gross. And yeah, but you would think that the way this year went, because part of you thinks that had they gone out and gotten Breece Hall at the trade deadline, maybe we'd be having a very different conversation about the Chiefs right now.
So, you know what? I think the other guy we got to talk about here, Xavier Worthy. I'm with you that I do have some faith in Travis Kelce. I mean, the floor is shaky if we're getting this like feeling that he is already checked out, but I've still got him as a top 6 tight end on the week. But Xavier Worthy, I think, is the interesting discussion here. Assuming, let's just for the sake of this conversation, assume Rashee Rice isn't going to play this week. Where would Xavier Worthy land in your rankings? Because this is one, like, it feels like on paper you should get him there where he is in, wide receiver 2 consideration. But based on what we've seen so far this year, like, I can't get him inside my top 40. I think Juju Smith-Schuster is a guy that kind of works well with what Gardner Minshew does, just throwing those short little passes, letting him create after the catch. And we've seen that Juju Smith-Schuster does kind of step into that Rashee Rice role when Rashee Rice can't play. So to me, like, if you're desperate and you need to start Xavier Worthy, you can. But like I said, he's outside of my top 40. This is one to me where, like, Travis Kelce is kind of the only Chiefs player I feel really confident getting in my lineups.
Yeah, I hear you there. I mean, it's just, I think that the Chiefs, and we'll talk about the Bengals, it's a real key of what the motivation level arguably is 0 now at this point. So do they try to finish strong, or do they just lay an absolute egg? And going up against the Titans have not been playing for anything since August. So they're very familiar of playing hard without playing for anything. So it's going to be an interesting thing to watch here. But I think on Rice or on Worthy, you're looking, I mean, are you playing Deebo Samuel or Xavier Worthy?
Right.
Are you going to play Khalil Shakir or Xavier Worthy? So yeah, that's kind of the conversation that you're looking at for this spot.
Is Gardner Minshew Gen Z Ryan Fitzpatrick? Is that what we're looking at with Gardner Minshew now? Just the guy who, on his 5th team in 6 years, just seems to somehow stumble into starting every single season. To me, I mean, like, for, I feel like 5-10 years from now, the memory of Ryan Fitzpatrick is only going to be held on to by some of us older guys. And I feel like, the kids are going to be looking at Gardner Minshew the same way that we used to look at Ryan Fitzpatrick, this guy who, like, is more than capable of being a backup quarterback, is probably going to play in the NFL until he's 38 years old or so. And I just see him signing with a new team every year and somehow stumbling into a handful of starts every season.
It was probably about 15, 20 years ago. I was having a conversation with my buddy Andrew, and we were talking about baseball. We were talking about pitching rotations because about 20 years ago, every single team had 5 starting pitchers, and that 5th pitcher would get shelled every 5 days. Yeah. And I was saying, what are we doing here? Why are we doing this? Why, if you've got 4 good pitchers, why are you running a 5th guy out there to get shelled every single week? And then so what happened? Eventually, teams got smart and realized, hey, we can just start our bullpen, and we'll start our bullpen. We have these good guys for an inning or 2. We'll just throw them out there, and then we'll go that direction. Someday, Dave, you're going to have a smart team that's going to realize, hey, if we throw $8 million here instead of throwing $50 million to Kyler Murray, let's throw $8 million here to Jameis Winston and $8 million to Joe Flacco and $8 million to Gardner Minshew. And we'll just have 4 of these guys, and we'll just decide week to week of like, who's going to be the hot one this week? Who are we going to plug in? Who's playing hot right now? Well, Jameson is on a heater. So we'll go Jameson for a couple weeks. Oh, Jameson cooled off. Let's get Flacco in there. Oh, Flacco cooled off. Let's get Gardner in there. I think that an entrepreneurial, enterprising team out there, just collect these Ryan Fitzpatrick type backup quarterbacks that you can plug in for 2 or 3 or 4 games, and then unplug them as soon as it starts as the heater's over. And let's do it. Let's get the bullpen game going here for a quarterback.
If any team were to do this to try to innovate football in this sort of way, I think it would be Les Snead, right? Sean McVay and the Rams, and with Matthew Stafford, nearing the end of his career, Jeff, we might see this. We might make your dream become a reality. Anything else we want to talk? I mean, we didn't even talk about the Titans, but what is there to talk about? Cam Ward has looked okay in the last couple of weeks. I like seeing that, but like I don't have a lot of faith in the receivers. It seems like that ball gets spread really thin. Now we're seeing like just enough Tony Pollard that you don't want to start Tajay Spears, but you also don't want to start Tony Pollard. I mean, I prefer Tony Pollard in rankings, but he is in that same RB3 tier that we talked about with Audric Estime and other guys you don't feel too great about. So this is one that I don't know, like if you're desperate, Jeff, who's the Titans player you want to start this week?
How dare you? How dare you besmirch this year's version of the fantasy playoff Titans running back with Tony Pollard is the running back 2 in fantasy over the last 2 weeks. And so hypothetically, you're thinking on paper, this Chiefs might be a tough matchup. But if the Chiefs have given up and Tony Pollard is pushing towards extending so right now, Derrick Henry has a 4-season streak of 1,000 yards. Najee Harris had a 4-season streak of 1,000 yards, and those are the longest too. Tony Pollard is on a 3-season streak of 1,000 yards, and he is right on the edge of extending that and tying with Derrick Henry. We know that Najee Harris streak is going to come to an end, but Tony Pollard needs 153 more yards to join Derrick Henry as being the longest active streak of 1,000-yard rushers. And if you knew that Tony Pollard had 3 consecutive 1,000-yard streaks of 1,000 yards and could extend it to 4, you either read my article earlier this week or you are a very, very smart person.
So, all right. I mean, and like I said, I do prefer Tony Pollard to Tajay Spears. I made that flip after preferring Spears ahead of Pollard in a handful of lineups. But yeah, I mean, still just like, I get where you're going, and I lied. I've got him a few spots ahead of Audric Estime. He is in the Kamani Vidal, Kyle Monungai, Michael Carter tier for me. So, not a guy I'd feel good about, but I've got him in the RB3 consideration. And I guess the out would be that the Chiefs are just on quit watch this week after finally being eliminated from the playoffs, and that you see the Chiefs just kind of phone this weekend, and Tony Pollard can run all over them. So don't hate that call out, Jeff. Let's move on to the next game here. The Bengals at the Miami Dolphins. Joe Burrow dealing with a knee injury, but he is practicing in full. Noah Fant didn't practice on Wednesday with an ankle injury, but he was back at practice yesterday on Thursday. T. Higgins limited throughout the week with concussion, hoping he can practice in full on Friday to incite some optimism that he'll be ready to go this week. Samaje Perine dealing with an ankle injury. He's practicing in full for the Dolphins. We got Darren Waller, rest/knee limited, so we'll expect him to be out there. Devon Achane practicing in full through that rib injury that he suffered a couple of weeks ago. Ollie Gordon practicing in full through an ankle injury. And then the biggest story of the week for the Miami Dolphins, Tua Tagovailoa was benched, and we are going to get a Quinn Ewers start. So, Jeff, let's start there with the Miami Dolphins and how we expect Quinn Ewers to affect and impact this offense. I could just put my cards on the table and tell you how I'm feeling. I still got Devon Achane as my RB1 on the week, going up against the Bengals team, giving up more points to running backs than any other team in the NFL. I expect them to lean heavily on Devon Achane in this matchup, tempering expectations a little bit for Jalen Waddle. And then I've still got Darren Waller as a tight end streamer. How are you looking at some of the offensive pieces in this Dolphins offense with Ewers?
Well, first off, so on Underdog, the Underdog has this tournament called the Greyhound, and the Greyhound, you can only do one entry into this tournament, and my team is very good, and my team is very healthy except for my quarterbacks. I had Daniel Jones, I had Jaden Daniels, and I had Tua Tagovailoa, and of course I have Puka Nacua. So I start this week off with a heater from Puka Nacua. Mike McDaniel, the bill is going to be in the mail here on you pulling Tua Tagovailoa against a Bengals matchup that you would think would be a great go-off spot here, but my quarterback just went to dust, and so that's frustrating. That's neither here nor there. It doesn't help anybody win their fantasy league. That's just me venting on this replacement here on what should be a prime matchup against the Bengals defense that quarterbacks have taken advantage of. Where do I see this offense with Ewers? I tend to think, and this kind of, maybe we didn't talk about it too much with Gardner Minshew, but when you get these backup quarterbacks, the way I view it is their go-to guy. I knock them down just a little bit, but I still kind of think that they funnel targets to their go-to players, and then
Mhm.
every other piece just turns to dust, evaporates. The overall volume comes out of the passing game. You knock down the top guy, but at the same time, hyper targeting in with a quarterback that's going to lock onto those guys. And so I think that you're still playing Waller because this is a Bengals team that you're targeting all the tight ends against. And I think a lot of what we've seen from the production out of the McDaniels passing attack has been to really scheme up the opportunity for a player. McDaniel is very confident in his scheme. And so I think Waller, we saw the big game on Monday night, and Waller had that spot. You're playing him against the Bengals because you're playing every tight end against the Bengals, even though we did see the Baltimore Ravens tight ends fall flat last week. But funneling targets to Waller, funneling targets to Waddle, and then, I mean, you weren't playing any other Dolphins pieces before previously.
Right.
I mean, the floor can't get much lower, but at the same time, the floor can't get lower. We saw a negative passing yard season out of the Jets, game out of the Jets this year. So the floor is always nothing, but the floor has been pretty low for this Dolphins passing attack.
So let's talk about the Bengals here. And Jeff, maybe I'm like totally big braining this, but Joe Burrow, we saw last week, did not have a good game. The team has been mathematically eliminated from the playoffs. And I can't help but wonder how much of that quietish game from Joe Burrow came because T. Higgins wasn't out there for correct me if I'm he missed the entire game, right? Or did
Yes,
he
he did not
exit
play.
yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah. So T. Higgins out for the entire game. And now if T. Higgins doesn't play again, we're seeing Jamar Chase just I mean, he's having a good year. Don't get me wrong. It's still Jamar Chase, but he is not having anything close to the season that he had last year. So Joe Burrow was a guy that, we were talking about, hey, like Joe Burrow's back. He came back earlier than expected. We're plugging this guy in as an elite QB1. Do you have any reservations in putting him in that elite tier of QB1s this week if T. Higgins can't go?
Much like the parallels between the Bengals and the Chiefs are way too much to ignore this week, because
Yeah.
I think you're having the same argument here where you love the matchup, you love the potential fantasy pieces, but at the same, all the air's out of the balloon. And I do think that maybe, I think in the argument for the Bengals would be all the airs out of the balloon game was last week against the Ravens, where they had that collapse against Buffalo the week before, and that kind of, they knew it was inevitable that okay, it's not happening this year, and they go out and lay an egg against the Ravens and officially get themselves eliminated. Like, a big part of me wonders if we don't see a situation here where the Bengals say, we've already lost it all. It's, money's on the table. Let's just go out here and we see one of these Joe Burrow 5 touchdowns, 400 yards, just throw it all out there
Hope
type
so.
of a game. But at the same time, yeah, it's the 1, 2, 3 Coon of it all. And last week, going into last week's game, the timing was really curious, but kind of Joe Burrow dropping those of like not having fun comments, and then Jamar Chase following it up and saying, well, we're just frustrated with a lot of things. It's in doing the DFS show, I think the Bengals are one of the most interesting conversations on the DFS side, because you could have this game where there's nothing to lose. Let's just rip it. Let's just do 25 targets to Burrow's feeding this guy Chase, and just they go out. And you also could have this, we don't even want to be here. Why are we still going to work? Like, what are we doing here? And just lays an egg. And meanwhile, on the other side, you got Darren Waller just runs free all day long.
So Jeff, we're analysts, which means we are objective in our process, and we do things. But let's be honest, we're humans and we're emotional, and we overthink things just like everybody else does that plays fantasy football. Home league right now, which, as anybody knows, that's the most important league out there. It's not about the money; it's about beating my friends that I've been friends with for over 20 years, and that's all I really care about. And this week, I have my choice between starting Joe Burrow, Jacoby Brissett, Brock Purdy. Who are you starting between that trio?
Well, I want to give a hat tip to our fearless leader, Joe, because Joe literally just yesterday said our job is to basically make a stand, to put something out there. And so I do apologize, because playing this of saying both things are in play for the Bengals, either in a blow up game or a quick game, is playing both sides. That's not what we're supposed to do. I'll say it out that play Joe Burrow and play Jamar Chase in fantasy. I'm play Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow in your fantasy playoffs. I am making a stand here that you want to play Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase in fantasy football.
All right, there we go. That's how I had it. Just wanted a heat check there. Let's move on to the next game, Jeff, and we'll try to rip through these next 6 as quickly as possible because I can hear your voice is just losing us. It's getting further and further and further the deeper we get into the show.
My very best here. Trying to find like different ways of like, can I do this? Like, can I?
We've only got 6 games left. We're going to do our best here, Jeff. You're a trooper for making it through. All right, next game. And now we are officially in the afternoon slate. We've got the Jacksonville Jaguars facing off against the Denver Broncos in Denver. The Denver Broncos, who just forgot how to lose football games, apparently, like just keep squeaking out these wins every single week. Bashal Tutin out for what we expect to be the remainder of the fantasy football playoffs. They're saying a few weeks. He had to undergo surgery on his finger, and they said probably out a few weeks. With 2 weeks left in the season, we're looking at Bashal Tutin kind of off the fantasy radar. RJ Harvey practicing in full with a ribs injury, and then Marvin Mims Jr. practicing in full with a biceps injury. Jeff, let's start by talking about the Jacksonville wide receivers here. I preferred Jacoby Myers to Brian Thomas Jr. this week, and a lot of that has to do with the expectations that Pat Surtain is likely going to glue himself to Brian Thomas Jr. And on top of that, we've just seen Jacoby Myers has looked fantastic, awarded with a much-deserved 3-year, $60 million contract just yesterday. Happy to see that. You know, we've talked about it so much. Jacoby Myers is exactly what this offense needed. I think Jacoby Myers getting that extension, knowing that they've still got Parker Washington there, Travis Hunter coming back this next year. You know, we can speculate all offseason again about Brian Thomas Jr. and what's going to happen with him and where he's going to get traded to and yada, yada, yada. But for the sake of conversation right now, let's keep it on week 16. What are you doing with Brian Thomas Jr. and Jacoby Myers in this matchup?
I want to say that I think I understand the way that we view the Denver defense. I think that from everything I've seen in the fantasy circles, it's too extreme of like full panic that they're playing Denver. Denver's defense has not been good the last couple. It's not been the Denver defense that we think in our mind the last couple of weeks. We saw that Marcus Mariota primetime spot where the Commanders passing attack really had a good game. We saw last week 276 yards from Jordan Love. These games are trending more towards being open games that there's a lot of scoring involved in. And so I do think the Jaguars, I give the faith to Liam Cohen, and I think the receivers are very good. I think Trevor Lawrence is playing very well. I'm not in full blown sit everybody against Denver because it's Denver, because we haven't seen the Broncos give those defensive performances over the past month. And I believe in the talent on the Jaguar side. So I'm there on Myers. I think Myers is a good spot. I think that Brian Thomas, the way that you're looking at him, the volume hasn't been there the second half of the year, but we got a touchdown last week. And I think if you're going to look at this game as a potential to shootout, Thomas is that type of play that can give you fantasy value just on one play. That is definitely in play. So yeah, I'm not full blown panic about the Jaguars playing against the Denver defense.
Yeah, and I've got Jacoby Myers cracks my top 24. Brian Thomas Jr. cracks my top 36. So I'm not saying to like bench them, but we also have to realize, you know, Pat Surtain picked up that injury. I think it was week 12 or so. He had that pec injury, and I feel like that had impacted him for a few weeks. Where the Denver defense as a whole has been a little bit more susceptible. Pat Surtain has not. Like, he is still shutting down every single top defender or receiver that he has to go up against. And what we've seen from Pat Surtain is that he's usually shadowing the most athletic. It's not always just the top guy. It's not always the top target getter. Like, you know, I remember going into that Chargers game, we were like, who is Pat Surtain going to stick on? Is it going to be Keenan Allen? Is it going to be Ladd McConkey? And ended up being Quentin Johnson. So this, with Brian Thomas Jr. being that athletic downfield guy, I'd expect Surtain on him a little bit. And that's why I preferred Jacoby Myers in this matchup. But Jacoby Myers is a wide receiver 2. Brian Thomas Jr. is a wide receiver 3. I think that's kind of what your expectation is as well.
Absolutely.
Broncos backfield, RJ Harvey is just.
Can we talk about Jaguars backfield real quick?
Yeah.
Because grab LaQuinn Allen.
Oh yeah, I did in a lot
of these that. Yeah, and it's one of these that this is how you win the waiver wire. You grab LaQuinn Allen because I'm not maybe I'm just missing it, but I'm not seeing him mentioned a lot as a waiver ad here this week. But you add LaQuinn Allen here because we do know that Tootin is out for the rest of the fantasy regular season. So if something were to happen that Travis Etienne misses the next week's game, LaQuinn Allen is getting a ton of volume in your fantasy championships. And so the way that you win your leagues is to grab LaQuinn Allen. And so instead of waiting until he's the obvious waiver claim, until everybody's grabbing LaQuinn Allen because Travis Etienne misses a game, grab him right now, because backfill backup running backs, backfill backup running. Anytime you see somebody get hurt, the way to win the waiver wire is to continue to backfill the backup running backs, not to try to be the guy that wins this week's plug-in starter, just to continue to build that depth so that with the next week, if that were to happen, everybody goes to put that waiver claim in and LaQuinn Allen, and they all see him on your roster, and then they all say, dang it, Dave, you got us again. So make sure to add LaQuinn Allen if he's available.
Just looking at the accuracy contest that we do, Jeff, I just pulled up LaQuinn Allen's Week 16 rankings, and there's nobody in the industry higher on LaQuinn Allen than I am. And that doesn't mean to start him by any means, but like I've got him at running back 48, and I'm kind of shocked that nobody else has him inside the top 50. To me, like we have seen that there's going to be a secondary back, and where LaQuinn Allen has been coming in just to run a lot of decoy routes and pass blocking and things of that nature. I think with Bashal Tootin out of the mix, it wouldn't surprise me if LaQuinn Allen ends up with 8 to 12 carries and another 2 to 4 targets, and that is more than enough to crack inside the top 48 here. So not a guy that I like need to start by any means, but I expect, I mean, he's been on the field all season, like just consistently getting like 25% of the snaps almost every single week. I expect that to grow a little bit with potentially a little bit more usage. Travis Etienne, obviously a smash play this week. He's probably going to get 80% of the opportunities, but yeah, definitely LaQuinn Allen. For the Denver Broncos, Jeff, RJ Harvey, we're seeing him pull away with the backfield. I think that he is a smash start. Jaleel McLaughlin, Tyler Bidet, I'm sorry, all those guys are just so far off fantasy consideration. Cortland Sutton has started to heat up the last few weeks. He is looking good. I think the big question here, Jeff, is that we saw Pat Bryant take the role from Troy Franklin, like very much so. Pat Bryant became the wide receiver too. He was a guy that was getting fantasy consideration as a starter. I mean, Troy Franklin was getting pushed to like 1-2 targets per game. Like he was just completely useless in fantasy. But then last week, Pat Bryant misses. Troy Franklin steps back in, has a big game, catches a touchdown, very much so in play in fantasy. But now with Pat Bryant potentially back, I don't know what to make of this. And I paged Cecil Lammey in base camp yesterday, hoping for some insider information, and he hasn't gotten back to me yet. But this is one where I expect Pat Bryant to come back in and take back that wide receiver 2 role that he had seemingly won a month ago. But at the same time, it's Sean Payton, and it's so hard trying to guess what he's going to do.
Yeah, this is where Dynasty Twitter is going to go off on me, but RJ Harvey's not a good running back. And RJ Harvey is, I think the reason why they're playing Pat Bryant is because RJ Harvey, the vision is not there in terms of the way that it was with J.K. Dobbins. We know Troy Franklin is not a good run blocker. And so I think they've had to go to Lil Jordan Humphrey. They've had to go to Pat Bryant because of the shortcomings in the run blocking game from Troy Franklin, and because the compensation that RJ Harvey needs when it comes to just versus J.K. Dobbins being a very natural running back, being a guy that is able to play off of having a little bit less run blocking out there. I think that it's been overcompensating. And so with Pat Bryant available, I'm out on Troy Franklin here. But maybe, and that being said, the Jaguars have been a very good run defense. And so maybe it does enter the conversation of saying, we know we can't run anyways. Troy Franklin's our better receiver here, so we'll play Franklin here in this spot. We'll just punt on the run game. But from what we've seen, I think that it's in tandem with RJ Harvey coming in and recognizing they need better run blocking out there from their entire team, from their wide receivers.
Jeff, you and I are never ones to shy away from taking big stands in our rankings. And sure enough, I asked you the question before I even checked what your stance was on it, and you and I, by far the lowest in the industry on Troy Franklin this week, with a consensus ranking of, where was this? I lost this consensus ranking of wide receiver 40. You have him at wide receiver 66. I have him at wide receiver 72. You and I haven't talked Troy Franklin at all this week, but as we so often do, just ended up in the same place and realize that as we're talking about it. Anything else we need to talk about on this one, Jeff, or do you think we covered everything we need to with this game?
I think we're good.
All right, on to the next one. Falcons at Cardinals. Bijan Robinson practicing in full through an illness. Drake London back at practice, dealing with a knee injury. We will definitely talk about that. Kyle Pitts also on the injury report with a knee injury that popped up on Thursday. Then we've got Marvin Harrison Jr. back at practice in a limited fashion. Jeff, let's what do you want to start with? There's a lot to talk about in this game.
I just think maybe general mindset of both of these teams. I think that you've got two veteran quarterbacks here that are recognizing their opportunities to be starting quarterbacks in the NFL are probably running out. And so it feels like to me, they're playing just complete house money, that they're basically the way the Cardinals are playing. I wrote in my Targets Report article this week that the way that the Cardinals are playing, it's like they've bet every over and got fantasy football for Trey McBride and Michael Wilson, and they're just, heck it, let's just go. And we're not even going to try to play complimentary football. We're not going to try to do anything at all. We're going to have Trey McBride do what Mark McGwire did when he passed the home run record with Roger Maris at 61, and then McGwire goes out and hits 70. It's just like McBride is going to fly so far past the Zach Ertz's 116 receptions mark that it's going to look wild in retrospect that it's that close.
Let's talk about Michael Wilson and kind of what we expect here, because we have seen over the last, 5 weeks now, we have seen 4 awesome games from Michael Wilson and 1 not so great game from Michael Wilson. And that not so great game came when Marvin Harrison Jr. was out there. So what are we doing here? Like, if Marvin Harrison Jr. plays, are we still starting Michael Wilson, or is it just like his start and sit status? Is that 100% contingent on whether Marvin Harrison Jr. is active or not?
I'm still going to play Wilson. I like this matchup. I think the Falcons defense has really struggled to close out the season here. I think that there's that one game. I mean, they went off against the top Texans pass defense last week with Wilson, but that one game also was against the Rams, who division rival, know the team well. The Rams are a strong defense there. So that's kind of, I think, factors into a little bit with the conversation. But I think for this spot, I just want pieces of this game, because I think this is one of those games that's going to ping pong back and forth, and you're going to want pieces of Michael Wilson. You're arguably probably in the position that you're in because of Michael Wilson. So to unplug him and not have that, I'm not there, even if Marvin Harrison comes back. And if I have to live with a lower game from Michael Wilson, so be it. But I think that, again, like I said, you're in the spot that you're in because of Michael Wilson. So keep playing Michael Wilson.
Yeah, I've got him as my wide receiver 25 on the week, and then I've got Marvin Harrison Jr. as my wide receiver 22. So very close in my rankings, but both very much so in starting consideration. Michael Carter, Jeff. How high are you on Michael Carter? I think that's the question a lot of people have. Early in the week, I went on with our friend Chris Harris, and we talked about our waiver wire pickups, and I was a little bit tepid on Michael Carter. And when we did our waiver wire show with Alfredo Brown earlier in the week, I was also a little bit cool on Michael Carter. But as the week has progressed, he's getting the workhorse treatment in practice. Jonathan Gannon has sung his praises. I expected Amari DeMercado, last week, very limited coming back from that high ankle sprain, but I expected to see Michael Carter distance himself, or I'm sorry, Amari DeMercado distanced himself from the ankle injury and see a bigger role in week 16. But everything we're hearing out of Arizona sounds like they are content to just lean heavily on Michael Carter. So I'm taking that cheese. I'm putting him in a lot more lineups than I wish I was. And I've got him ranked inside my top 30 running backs this week.
Yeah, I'm there as well. I think I pointed out last week, I was right, but I was wrong with the Texans, where, everybody's kind of on Dare Gumbawale last week as like, if something were to happen, would be Marks or whatnot. And I said, I thought it was going to be British Brooks. I was wrong. It was Jawar Jordan. But I said, like, we see these running backs that end up being the emergency guy, just get us out of the game. And I think that Dare Ogunbowale was that 2 weeks ago. But having a full week without Nick Chubb, there would be another back that they would plug in as kind of the complimentary back there. I think the Cardinals' entire season now is just emergency, get us out of the season, and they're just relying on Michael Carter here in the spot of, we're just trying to get out of this year.
Yeah, I agree there. So yeah, firing Michael Carter up with I don't want to say confidence, but as much confidence as you can get from a guy that you picked up prior to the Week 16 matchup off of the waiver wire. For the Atlanta Falcons, I don't think there's a ton to talk about here. Kirk Cousins has started to look a little bit better. I guess Drake London, the conversation here, it seems like he's trending towards playing. He's expressed some optimism. Jeff, you can't possibly sit an active Drake London, but like this is just kind of a conversation for you and I and the other people out there who are doing rankings in an accuracy contest. If we knew Drake London was going to be 100% fully healthy, no restrictions, he would be my wide receiver 4 on the week. But because of the potential limitations coming back from this PCL injury, we know this is a tough one. I'm ranking him as more of a back end wide receiver 1 than like the top 3, top 4, top 5 guy I had been ranking him as.
Yeah, I agree there. I think he's my wide receiver.
All that to be
14
said,
right
still
now.
starting.
So yeah, you're going to start him. I mean, you're not going to get cute and sit Kyle Pitts. I know Kyle Pitts is taken off here with London out of the lineup. Don't get cute and sit Kyle Pitts in the spot coming off of the best fantasy game ever for a tight end, basically. And so play Kyle Pitts, play Drake London if he's available. Play your pieces. And Kirk Cousins has shown the ability to get the ball to those pieces.
Yeah, looking much better than he did last year. So I like to see that. Hopefully Kirk Cousins can get an opportunity somewhere in 2026. Let's move on to the Raiders at Houston Texans.
I want to say Bijan Robinson. I want to have this point on either Bijan Robinson, Devin Achane, or Gibbs. But what we're seeing, it's really wild because all three of those players are above 1,100 rushing yards. They are above 60 receptions, and they're above 450 receiving yards. And no player has done that since Christian McCaffrey back in 2019. So we're seeing this thing that has not been done for 6 seasons, and 3 running backs. Their stat lines are so close together, but it's just fascinating. And to me, we did a rookie episode this past week,
and I'm sorry,
did not talk about
for that, or have already eclipsed that.
They've already done that. So they've already done that through their first 14 games. So yes. So we're seeing Jeremiah Love coming into the draft, and he very much fits this profile for what we're seeing for some of these running backs. And so I think it's an interesting thing to just kind of track, kind of keep an eye on as we see a copycat league, as we see these running backs that are really kind of, these guys are putting up numbers that haven't been done since that one Christian McCaffrey year we all remember, or since like Marshall Faulk, LaDainian Tomlinson type time of what we're getting out of these handful of running backs here.
Let's move on to the Raiders at Houston Texans. Tyler Lockett limited on Wednesday and a full participant on Thursday. He's working through a knee injury. Woody Marks has yet to practice this week, dealing with an ankle injury. So we'll see what happens on Friday. Today, hopefully he's able to get on the practice field and inspire some hope that he'll be ready to go. Nick Chubb back at practice, limited on Wednesday, full participant on Thursday. So Jeff, for the sake of discussion, let's just say that Woody Marks does not play this week after back-to-back DNPs. I don't have him in my rankings right now. Jawar Jordan or Nick Chubb, who do you prefer between the two?
Either if you're desperate, neither if you're not. So, it's, I think I would expect a little bit of committee approach here because I understand what we saw from Jawar Jordan last week. And I understand we do tend to go towards the young running back and, look at that flash. They're going to want to see that. But I mean, Woody Marks had distanced himself from Nick Chubb, but Nick Chubb was still involved week in and week out. And so I tend to think that if there is no Woody Marks, if Nick Chubb is active, you're going to get reps for both of these running backs probably here in this spot. And you're relying on somebody to get a touchdown. Do you feel better about Jawar Jordan or Nick Chubb to get goal line work? You didn't, when it was all Woody Marks, you weren't seeing involvement in the passing game for the running back. So I wouldn't expect involvement for either of those guys in the passing game. You're hoping somebody gets the touchdown here, which I tend to would lean towards Chubb to be that guy. But again, either if you're desperate, neither if you're not.
I also glossed over it. And that by glossed over it, I mean completely forgot to say it. Geno Smith back at practice after missing last week's game. He's practicing in full, so we expect to see him out there again. Does that inspire more or less confidence in the pass catchers for the Raiders for you?
None. I play Brock Bowers and don't do play Brock Bowers and hope that Genty catches 8 balls because he's not gotten there on the ground in this Texans defense. We know what this Texans
Genty
defense
is a scary start this week.
You get the feeling, just like we've seen for a couple, just like we saw last week with the Raiders against the Eagles, you get the feeling that this is one of these games that the Texans are winning 28-0 at halftime and they just sit on the ball the second half. I feel like that's where we're headed here.
Yeah, and you can't bench Genty because the upside, we've seen the 3 touchdown games and we've seen the 5 catch games. That's always there, but this is a very, very tough matchup. And I think that you're spot on. Like, if Genty is going to get it done this week and he's going to have a boom game, it's going to come through the passing attack in a negative game script. But that kind of seems like the only out in this matchup when you look at the worst offensive line in football going up against the best defensive line in football. That typically makes for a disaster. So I've got Genty as my RB24 on the week. I can't confidently or reasonably tell anybody that they should sit Ashton Genty, but if you made it this far with Ashton Genty, you kind of know the player that he has been, and it has just been ice cold for the last month. Anything else on this one, Jeff? Or I think we kind of covered it all, right? Like, Dalton Schultz, you're starting him. Nico Collins, you're starting him. Jaden Higgins kind of falls into that desperation flex territory if you really need somebody there.
Yep, I completely agree.
Steelers at Lions. Aaron Rodgers dealing with a left wrist injury, is practicing in full. And this is crazy. We hardly ever see this late in the year, but every single fantasy relevant Lions player is healthy right now. So they're going to be working with their full deck of cards. This is
No, they're not.
Who's
Sam Laporta's out.
Well, he's on IR. We don't talk about players on IR. Yes, they're
as healthy, but I mean, it does affect
weeks.
things because we've seen the Lions hyper target their passing attack towards Jameson Williams, towards Amon-Ra St. Brown, towards Gibbs. So, yeah, yeah, you're right. But
I mean, we don't talk about players on IR. We just kind of gloss over that. Yeah, yeah, that's just kind of the way that we've done this show. Yes, no Sam Laporta, and that is something that we talked about on the ranking show earlier this week, where I was just saying that, like, this early in the season, so many mouths to feed, but it was still a concentrated offense where he knew exactly where the touches were going to go. And then when they removed Sam Laporta for the equation, they didn't put somebody else back in there. It just got more concentrated. And now, Jeff, I'm sure you've got it the same in your rankings, because our rankings always look very similar. But Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams are both inside my top 10 this week because they are both going to get fed. That is what we have seen in this Sam Laporta-less offense.
Yeah, it's my go-to. Why are you going to play the guy? Because he's going to score more fantasy points. So why do you have Jameson Williams as a top 10 receiver? Because he's been a top 10 receiver.
Yeah. What do you think Jameson Williams on the year? Do you know where he ranks, Jeff?
On the year, isn't he like wide receiver 8 on the year or something? Like, maybe not quite that high, but
no, he's the wide receiver 8 on the year. And this was a guy that, it's been rough, man. The first month of the season, he didn't do a ton. He's had a couple 0-point performances in there. But let me ask you, Jameson Williams, who is being drafted outside of the top 20 wide receivers, regardless of how he gets there, if he's given you top 10 production and you drafted him outside of the top 20, the consistency doesn't even matter. Like, he's a smash pick. Like, he's a good pick at that point, right?
I mean, I think consistency is one of the most overrated things in fantasy football. But if you're telling me that in the 4th or 5th round, I can get a top 10 wide receiver, I am going to select the top 10 wide receiver literally every single time.
Yeah. And especially, like, we talk about it too. Like, when we're looking back in hindsight, so much gets lost in the discussion. The first month of the season, sure, it was tough with John Morton calling plays, just Ben Johnson out of the picture. They were really trying to figure out what they planned to do and how this was going to work out. And then we saw, the middle part of the season was kind of boom bust, where Jameson Williams would have a good game and then he'd have 0 points. But my goodness, this guy has been a wide receiver 1 in 4 straight weeks now, and we expect that can continue through the playoffs. If you get 6 straight wide receiver 1 weeks to close out a fantasy season, I don't care where a player was drafted, that's a darn good pick, and that's a guy that I want on my team. So hoping Jameson Williams can keep his hot streak alive. Jahmyr Gibbs, not the best week last week, but still ranking him as a top 3 running back, getting him in your lineup. What else is there to talk about with this one, Jeff? I mean, this, like, the Steelers, we can talk about the backfield a little bit. This has been a weird one where, like, Jaylen Warren still has the lead in touches and snaps, but all of the high value touches, the targets, the touchdowns all seem to be going Kenneth Gainwell's way. So if you look just at the raw snap and touch splits, you'd think that, Jaylen Warren would be so far ahead of Kenneth Gainwell, but based on the passing down usage, I've got Kenneth Gainwell inside my top 30 running backs this week.
Yeah, I'm a little bit surprised that we haven't gotten the story about like Kenneth Gainwell and Aaron Rodgers are at a breakfast club together, or Kenneth Gainwell's bringing Aaron Rodgers coffee every morning, or something like that. Because
I mean, Rodgers
definitely,
has been singing Gainwell's praises the last couple of
yes,
weeks.
it
Very
very
much so.
much feels like there's very much feels like Aaron's got a favorite guy. Everywhere Aaron
Mhm.
goes, he's got a favorite guy, and Kenneth Gainwell is Aaron's favorite guy. Is what it really feels like when you're looking at this. And so, yeah, your Gainwell is. It's basically through the receiving game. He's doing things that like Devin Achan and Christian McCaffrey are the only other running backs like doing the things
He's
he's doing in
averaging
the receiving game. It seems
over
like,
over 4 receptions per game over the last 5 weeks.
yeah.
Or I'm sorry, over 5 receptions per game over the last 5 weeks. Like, yeah, this guy is like maybe the top pass catching weapon on the Steelers right now.
Yeah, and when you look at the Lions defense, how are you going to attack the Lions defense? You know, you can't really run the ball against the Lions defense. You're going to attack them through the air, and that opens up very, very well for these short passes. And like part of me wonders if you don't get a little bit of there. I apologize. There have been some great matchups here with Aaron Rodgers has some great games, great moments in Detroit. If we don't get Aaron Rodgers walking through that tunnel and a little bit of discount double check, Aaron comes out here in this game and what could be a potential shootout. I believe it is at last I saw it was 51.5 points, highest over under on the week here.
Yeah. And we saw the discount double check last week. It was beautiful. It's been a while since we've seen that. Did you see the? I was just watching it real quickly as you were talking, trying to make sure that I got it correct. But did you see the where Aaron Rodgers was kind of talking about how the Steelers were all of these miscast players that couldn't find their footing with other teams, and that all of these guys have kind of found
Yeah.
a home in Pittsburgh? And then they asked Aaron Rodgers, they were like, "Do you feel like you are one of those same players?" And he was like, "No, no, like not me.
Aaron
Like I'm,
Rodgers,
I'm
what are you
talking
talking
about
about?
them. Like I'm Aaron Rodgers."
I believe they're calling themselves the Island of Misfit Toys, and I think
Yeah,
that that this is what you get. Like you get if a unit has given themselves a name, then circle that. So that's an interesting thing here on the Island of Misfit Toys for the Steelers.
and
I
like we've talked
did
about
I
this with Aaron Rodgers forever. He makes chips to put on his shoulder. Like if there isn't a chip to put on
yeah.
his shoulder, he is going to find a reason. And apparently, his reason now is that Marquez Valdes-Scantling was let go by the Seattle Seahawks and picked up by the Steelers, and like that's the motivation that he's got to bring a ring to do his guy MVS now.
Ad, I mean, Adam Thielen was let go, and they picked him up.
Right.
It really is kind of these this ragtag group that you're getting a lot of veterans though that know what they're doing, know their job, and you're getting a lot of diversity in what they can offer against teams. I always enjoy the tilt on social media when something's happened, but I really enjoyed last week where you could tell people had looked at that Dolphins Steelers game and said, I mean, the Dolphins are coming in really hot, and I don't know if I buy the Steelers. I definitely don't buy Aaron Rodgers. And then the moment that the game kicked off, they recognized, wait a minute, I took Tua Tagovailoa in a freezing weather game against Aaron Rodgers. What have I done here?
Yeah, it's like Aaron Rodgers gets better when the weather turns cold. Like he was like
Yes.
forged in whatever you call that tundra. I mean, like his entire career played in Green Bay. It's like he plays his best weather when it's cold. And then did you also see that like there's just good vibes around the Steelers right now. And
Yeah.
I know a lot of Steelers fans aren't feeling that way, but did you hear the same thing about DK Metcalf? Like they asked him about like what it's been like playing for the Steelers. And he was just like, this city, man. He's like, it's just like a blue collar city. He's like, you just gotta get up early and show up to work and play through the cold, and it makes you tougher. Like this team, it seems right now like they are getting hot at the right time. And I know a lot of people are looking at them as kind of like, just the guys that are gonna maybe come out of the AFC North that nobody else wants to win. But this is a punchy team that I'm going to be watching closely as they get closer to the playoffs.
Well, and it's really fascinating in our fantasy football world because we know we hate Arthur Smith.
Mhm.
We've all decided that Aaron Rodgers is washed. You got the exciting young Caleb Johnson, like the exciting young rookie that everybody thought would be the league winner, is not involved at all. You've got
Mhm.
DK Metcalf. The volume hasn't been there for DK Metcalf. He's gotten through with some touchdowns, but it's one of these that there's no
Roman
predictable
Wilson is
volume.
lives in touches to Adam
Yeah,
Thielen.
there's no predictable volume. It's all the guys that annoy you that are getting the ball, and it's a Arthur Smith special. But at the same time, on a football sense, it's a fun team that you can tell is coming together at the right time, and it's going to be interesting to watch. I mean, this is going to be a tough spot for them, and the Lions really need this game. But at the same time, this game really doesn't mean that much for the Steelers because if they beat the Ravens next week, we know that it's done. They've won the NFC North.
Let's move on to the next game here, Jeff. We've got the Patriots playing against the Ravens. All of the fantasy relevant Patriots players are healthy, which we like to see for the Ravens. We've got Rashad Bateman practicing in full, still on the injury report with an ankle injury. Zay Flowers practicing in full through a neck injury. And then Lamar Jackson with his illness that he just happens to somehow get like 8 times a year. I don't know, man. Like, did you see the tweet that Lamar Jackson has what I'm gonna butcher it. I can't even remember something about Lamar Jackson having the I don't know. He's always sick, is what I'm getting at. Like this man is always dealing with something, but he's had a lot of rest days on Wednesday. Sounds like he's going to be good to go this week. Jeff, I'll ask you. I got a lot of pushback. I just shared my last rest of season rankings article on Twitter, and quite a few people were questioning why I still had Lamar Jackson high up in my rest of season quarterback rankings. For me, like this guy before his injury was the QB1 in fantasy football. He was outscoring everybody else. And then he got injured and he had a few weeks where he didn't look like himself. But over the last couple of weeks, to me, Lamar Jackson has looked like Lamar Jackson again. We see him rushing. We see him with the deep shots. I don't have any concerns about Lamar Jackson, but based on some of the responses that I got, it seems like a lot of fantasy managers still do have concerns about Lamar Jackson.
I think last week really threw a lot of people because basically everybody saw that Bengals matchup and they felt like they haven't gotten it from Lamar Jackson, but we've got this Bengals matchup here. So, if he could, this is a spot for him. And then his overall volume didn't get there, but at the same time, because the Bengals couldn't do anything at all. And I think the way he was playing in that game, had Joe Burrow been pushing from the other side, we would have gotten one of these classic Lamar Jackson 35, 40 point type performances, given the way that he was playing in that game. They just didn't need to do it because the Bengals
let the gas off at halftime.
Yeah, exactly. And so and there was a really good quarterback week last week too, across the board. There were a lot of good quarterback scores. And so it buried Lamar Jackson. I was really aggressive on my ranking of Lamar Jackson last week. And I ended up being the quarterback 1 ranker of the week because I was the highest by far on Trevor Lawrence, but I was high on Lamar Jackson, and it ended up being, he had a 18-point game and it ended up being like quarterback 18. And I was like, geez, there are so many weeks where an 18-point quarterback game is like quarterback 4, but because of the way that this week shook out, he was a quarterback 18. So yeah, I think it's a little bit under the radar there. He's sick here. This is a little bit more of an NBA thing than I want to tread lightly here. This is a little bit more of an NBA thing than it is a football thing. And so the injury to Patrick Mahomes, very real. He had a significant knee injury. Mm-hmm. Usually kind of in the NBA, when you got these 7-game playoff series, and when it starts to move a direction against a star player, you start to see these, he's playing through like this ankle thing, or he's playing through this knee thing, and I thought it was a little bit interesting on Mahomes, where on Sunday Night Football, all of a sudden nobody had talked about Mahomes' knee for not at all. And then all of a sudden it was like second half, it was like, see this knee brace. Like it's like, Mahomes has this knee thing going on here.
You saw that last year, right? Like the Eagles started to not look good. And then all of a sudden Jalen Hurts is in a knee brace.
Yeah. And so it's like, I mean, we just talked about the Steelers, the direction that's heading. And then, by the way, Lamar's been playing through that. Just to remind you, Lamar's been playing through this. And I'm not saying that we're there, but I do think it's definitely a thing in basketball that when you're in a 7-game series and it becomes obvious that you're not going to win the series, the star player does tend to have something that they've been playing through that gets revealed. Quarterback's not that far off from a star basketball player.
Agreed there. Now let's talk about the Patriots backfield, Jeff. It seems like it's finally happening. That Travion Henderson is just running away with the job, as he should. And we understand, the Patriots way. You can take Belichick out of the building, but you can't take the Patriots way out of Foxborough. There's some saying there that I can workshop. But Travion Henderson seems like he is running away with the backfield, as he should. I mean, we're just firing this guy up. I had some reservations last week, and I talked about it on the show, saying, like, I think Ramondre Stevenson's going to be a little bit more involved than people want him to. But the reality is 14-6 on touches. Ramondre Stevenson had one more catch, but, Travion Henderson, even if he is getting a, 55, 60, 65, whatever it is, like just a fraction of the backfield is enough for him to give you elite RB1 production.
Yeah, but I mean, we saw volume go Ramondre Stevens' way. Maybe that was part of a game script where they were winning by a lot and they were just trying to run the ball. I think this is going to be a really interesting spot for the Patriots because they're a pretty young team and they came in sky high against the Bills last week. They get up 21-0, and you got Scott Zolik on the radio declaring the Bills window is over. The Patriots rule the AFC. And then you lose that game. So how do they recover in this game here? How do they bounce back against a Baltimore team that knows they're playing for everything they've got here, that this is a spot they've got to win? This young team, do they bounce back? Or is this a case where sometimes with these young teams, they run so hot and everything's going so well that the first thing that goes wrong, all of a sudden a lot of doubt that has been silent prior to that all creeps in. And so I think that this will be a really interesting spot in just the growth and development of what is a very talented team and an organization clearly obviously headed in the right direction. Do they bounce back against a Baltimore team that is going to be a very tough game here? And I think that'll be interesting to monitor.
Anything else we're watching on this one, Jeff? We didn't really talk about the Patriots wide receivers, but I don't know how much there is to talk about. Stephon Diggs, man, like we see the boom games and we see the per route run metrics, but he's a guy that like I want to rank as a very high wide receiver one because we know the potential's there and we know Drake May is good. And we know there's not a lot of target competition, but it's just so hard to get him there that like I just kind of fall into this wide receiver 3 range with Stephon Diggs, and it's really hard for me to move him up any higher than that.
No, I think you're in the right spot. I mean, I was really surprised last week. I was really high on Stephon Diggs going into that game. And so laying that egg there, we haven't seen, I mean, the rushing has kind of fallen out for Drake May a little bit. I mean, he had 43 yards against the Bills, but coming into that, he was quieter in the rushing game over the last couple of weeks. We've seen the passing volume's decent, but it's not, he's running into 3 touchdown games or those types of things, starting to throw a couple more interceptions back half of the year, throwing a lot more interceptions than he had the first half of the year. So I think that Will Campbell being out is still kind of a big deal for the Patriots. So you're starting to add these things together, the direction and just it's been a commitment to a wide receiver committee. And I thought for sure that they were kind of having the opportunity to save Diggs for big moments to kind of preserve him there. But then last week, not being in a big moment and not having Diggs at all leads me to rethink my overall view on that.
You know, Drake May has been good this year. I don't want to take anything away from him, but I think a lot of people have this idea that he's like a top 2, top 3, just like an elite plug and play quarterback. And sure, he's a QB1. You're starting him every single week. But Jeff, since week 5, where do you think Drake May ranks in per game quarterback scoring?
I'd say probably about quarterback 16.
Not quite quarterback 9, but like I said, still, giving you QB1 production. But again, like we get so anchored to this early season bias where, he was a top 3 quarterback for the first month of the season. He's cooled off a little bit since then. And I only bring it up because you talk about the rushing starting to dissipate a little bit. You're still starting him as a QB1, but some of that early season shine has started to wear off a little bit. Still a very, very good quarterback. I'm not trying to besmirch Drake May by any means. Just one of those things that kind of gets lost in the discussion over the full season. Last game here, Jeff. Monday Night Football. San Francisco 49ers at Indianapolis Colts. Christian McCaffrey got a rest day. Ricky Pearsall still not practicing. My goodness, we finally see him start to look decent last week. Immediately re-injures his knee, and he is likely going to miss some time. Josh Downs got a personal day. Alec Pierce is limited with an Achilles injury. And then Anthony Richardson back at practice dealing with this eye injury, but it sounds like Phillip Rivers is going to start. Jeff, over under passing yards for Phillip Rivers this week. Last week it was set at 155.5. You think he goes over or under that this week?
I think he goes under that this week.
Whoa.
I mean, maybe. I don't know.
Let's take a deal over there. Okay.
Maybe feeling a little bit looser another week. I mean, do we think that Phillip Rivers can push the ball down the field? Is
that kind of shot? Oh my goodness. Yeah. I mean, this, I haven't seen, I can't remember ever seeing a game like that. It was, what it reminded me of. Who was that wide receiver that started for the Broncos a few years ago? Do you remember that? It was during that COVID year where like every Broncos quarterback.
Hinton, like Kendall Hinton.
Kendall Hinton, yes. This was like a more accurate Kendall Hinton game. Like, able to put the ball, but it was just like just these short ducks getting thrown out there. Like he was making the right reads and he was getting the ball. It's very inspirational, but yeah, that arm looks shot. And you saw like just consistently getting his shoulder rubbed on the sideline, like every time he wasn't playing. It's got to be tough playing in the NFL at 44 years old after 5 years off.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I remember and I believe he won the Super Bowls last year, but the Peyton Manning, like right at the end there, where it was like he knew exactly what the defense was going to do, but anytime it was over 15 yards, it was just these lollipop balls that it's like he needed Julius Thomas over the middle, like crosser of like, but here's this lollipop ball that Peyton Manning had to throw like 8 seconds too early, basically, and let him run under it 12 yards downfield is I feel like what we're dealing here with Phillip Rivers a little bit. I think the story is amazing. I think it's so cool. Yes. I think it's very good on the Colts of looking for an innovative solution because they've ran into a problem here where they lost Daniel Jones, they lost Anthony Richardson, Riley Leonard was injured. So I think that people forget about that. Riley Leonard got injured in that game too. And so like to think of an innovative solution here, because there's not a lot of quarterbacks out there that you can go out, and it's awesome on Phillip Rivers to basically go from your couch on Sunday to starting a game the next Sunday after not playing for 5 years is an absolutely amazing story. And I hope that he can pull the Colts here into the playoffs, but we knew this tough stretch that the Colts had to end the season, and now they're just in a really tough spot.
Yeah, I listened to a TED Talk a while back, and I was trying to find exactly what it was, but I remember there was one line that stuck out for me, and it was desperation often breeds innovation. And I think that's kind of where the Colts are right now. They are innovative, but maybe coming a little bit desperately. I also saw something cool. I don't know if you saw this clip going around yesterday where Phillip Rivers is out there like working with Anthony Richardson, like out there with one of those foam bats, like, trying to help his development. So like to see that as well, that this can, help maybe get Anthony Richardson back on track. But Jeff, let's talk about the pass catchers here for the Colts. Tyler Warren, like, is he even startable this week? Michael Pittman, is he startable? Like Josh Downs got the touchdown last week, but it wasn't pretty getting there. Tyler Warren is quietly, like, again, we talk about these early season biases. Tyler Warren, everybody was talking about him being the best pick in fantasy. Like he was up there with Brock Bowers and Trey McBride as a top 3 tight end, has been borderline unstartable for the last 3 months though. And now, especially with Phillip Rivers, I mean, I've got Tyler Warren as my tight end 12, which means he's in starting consideration, but in the same tier as Aronde Gadsden, Theo Johnson, and other guys that you really don't want to have to start if you don't have to.
Yeah, I'm at the same place with him. And now that you mentioned, I'm going to move Juwan Johnson ahead of Tyler Warren, but I'm there too.
I just did the same thing. I moved Juwan Johnson and Jake Ferguson ahead of Tyler Warren as I was saying that. So Tyler Warren actually now is my tight end 14.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, Tyler Warren, I mean, you're in a spot where, and I think it's tough in these type of situations because if you had Warren, you either drafted him as your tight end 2 and drafted a very early tight end 2, or you drafted him, you waited on tight end, you took him late, you took Tyler Warren, and you thought you had hit gold. And so you kind of sat out while everybody else is kind of grabbing their next tight end or like kind of grabbing that guy. And then you run into the end of the season where you felt like you hit gold. You're going to start Tyler Warren every single week. And
now you're playing against
the waiver to get picked over. And then all of a sudden now you don't feel great about Tyler Warren. And oh, by the way, everybody else has grabbed every single other tight end that has a pulse.
Yeah. Michael Pittman, last guy I want to talk about, Jeff, if you want to pull up your wide receiver rankings. I've got Michael Pittman as my wide receiver 30 this week. Not feeling great about it. Again, like back to my home league. I don't want to talk about all the leagues that I'm in, but like that's one where my home league, I have started Michael Pittman for most of the year. And this week, I am making the swap and putting Jaden Reed in ahead of Michael Pittman.
Yeah, wide receiver 37 for me. And I mean, I might adjust that if we see that Alec Pierce is going to be out. He'll be living in practice, so he's there.
He should be good to go, yeah.
I think Downs to me hypothetically would be the guy with a Rivers offense where you're kind of scheming up these things, these orbit motions and whatnot to get Downs the ball quickly and let him run after the catch. But he's out of practice. So if he's going to be out, I mean, Ashton Doolin doing something, I don't know. It's the same conversation overall of if you're talking about an over under of 150 yards for your quarterback, how many of these pieces are you going to play in fantasy?
Well, Jeff, we did it. And this is going to be the last one for the year.
I want
This
to say
is
really quick.
yeah.
I'm not Jonathan Taylor and James Cook. I think everybody kind of assumed the rushing title was over. Jonathan Taylor had run away with it. James Cook's only 28 yards behind Jonathan Taylor, and James Cook has really closed the gap by a couple hundred yards over the last couple of weeks. And so I think that's interesting to see because a Bills player has not led the league in rushing since O.J. Simpson in the 1970s.
Oh yeah, I feel like I'm partially to blame for the Jonathan Taylor. I don't want to say fall off. Like he's still been okay,
Dave,
but like,
dare you make him be bad?
I tweeted just like, hey, this guy is either going to break the all-time rushing record for touchdowns or he is going to cool off, and I'm kind of betting on the latter here. And oh my goodness, people are furious about that, and he has since cooled off quite a bit. So I'm sorry everybody for even putting that into the universe, but as I was getting to, Jeff, we are done here. This is the last one of these that we're doing this year. Everybody, we hope you all spend time with your family next week on Christmas and enjoy all that good stuff. This show has been a pleasure to do. Jeff and I have already started dipping our toes into rookie content a little bit. So we just did a show earlier in the week on some rookies to pay attention to as we start compiling this rookie guide that we do every single year. We're going to be putting more and more time into rookies, bringing you more rookie content, dynasty content, all that fun stuff. We're going to be super busy over it here. There is no off season when you're playing Dynasty, and we will be diving into these rookies in the very near future. So I want to thank everybody who has tuned into these mega episodes that we've done all season long, diving into all of these matchup previews. I want to thank everybody who's going to carry over with us into the off season, into rookie content, into draft content, all that fun stuff. I want to thank y'all so much for tuning in, and we will see you soon.